Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about What If Deku Had a Dark Secret Part 1. If you guys enjoy this What If and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends, and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story flyweeabooty from AO3. So let's start the video. Hiya. HIYA. What kind of greeting was that? Yes, yes, yes. Quickly, before he sees it. Damn, he hadn't been fast enough. Stupid, fat, crooked thumbs. But it's fine. He could salvage this. Crap. Why did Tokoyami have to be so quick? God damn it. Of all things to autocorrect to. Really? He flinches upon reading the message, stung by the sheer bluntness of Tokoyami's message. I shouldn't have bothered him. His eyes gloss over the text again, and it hits him just as hard the second time. Midoriya sighs in relief, the grip on his phone relaxing. Not just lame, pathetic. Why was it so hard to just sound like a normal person? Whoa, was Tokoyami actually humoring him? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 https // quirked archives. Net Detroit Smash, Quirk History. I didn't know you liked researching that sort of stuff. Oh god, did he zone out during class and miss something? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 I accessed the website purely out of curiosity. No need to be concerned. Phew, Detroit Smash will do. More like neurotic. Oh man, was this really happening? Midoriya grabs a bit of loose skin and squeezes it between his thumb and forefinger. Oh, nope, he wasn't dreaming. Come to think of it, the two of them had never hung out much at all. Not outside of class or training, anyway. That was probably his own fault, though. He'd never even thought to ask. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 I appreciate the invitation, but I do not wish to intrude on your personal space. Perhaps we could arrange to meet in a more neutral setting. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 I will be there momentarily. For some reason, Midoriya can't help but grin. In fact, he feels almost giddy. Weird. The sensation quickly dies, however, when he looks up from his phone to glance around his living space. This morning's smelly workout clothes are still on the floor. His only chair is occupied by a pile of hoodies, and his school books are scattered on the floor. He launches himself out of bed, rushing to grab his clothes and toss them in the hamper. His fingers make contact with a pair of briefs that he promptly wads into a ball and chucks across the room. 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐵 misses. Midoriya doesn't even bother getting on his feet, just scrambles on all fours to collect his laundry and get it out of sight. His hoodies are thrown in the closet, and he's just gotten to the books when a soft knocking sound sends him into full panic mode. Just a second. He calls back, kicking the remainder of the mess under his bed. When he makes it to the door, he's out of breath and has to take a second to compose himself. Come in, Midoriya wheezes, stepping aside to allow Tokoyami to enter. Tokoyami drifts past the doorway, his footsteps making no sound, and regards Midoriya's flushed face and breathless speech with concern. It wasn't unusual to see his classmate in such a frantic state, but he was curious to discover the cause of it nonetheless. He surveys the room, searching for obvious clues, only to be greeted by the unnerving multitude of paraphernalia in Midoriya's possession. Countless renditions of the same blonde man stare him down, their brilliant, white smiles almost menacing. His wide range of peripheral vision wasn't helping. Either he could see them from every angle, meaning there was no hope of simply ignoring them. Midoriya's voice interrupts his train of thought. Do you wanna sit down? His eyes snap back to the other boy's face, focusing there while he processes what's being asked. Tokoyami's gaze moves from Midoriya to Midoriya's desk chair. You can sit on the bed. The bed. Oh. Silence, you wretched creature. He hesitates for a moment, uncertain, then shuffles over to where Midoriya had indicated. His hands fold in his lap as he stiffly lowers himself to perch on the edge of Midoriya's mattress. When he looks up again, he finds his classmate staring at him. It's Tokoyami's red irises peering back that kick Midoriya out of his stupor, forcing him to become self-aware. The binders, he exclaims with a start, tearing away from the eye contact to stumble to his desk. Pretty sure I left them in here. He yanks open a drawer with a bit too much enthusiasm and ends up pulling the entire receptacle off its tracks. With a yelp, he jumps away just in time to save his toes from getting crushed. He really needed to stop forgetting his own strength. Tokoyami flinches as the drawer clatters noisily against the wood floor. As soon as it settles, however, he refocuses on Midoriya, searching for signs of injury. Sorry, are you hurt? No, Midoriya squeaks in reply. Just scared the crap out of. Getting on his feet, Tokoyami pads over to give assistance. He bends over and removes the binders from the drawer, setting them aside for now. Once it's empty, he picks the drawer up and begins to try to put it back on its tracks. Oh, Midoriya finally recovers from his shock. You don't have to do that. He doesn't even acknowledge the other boy's protest, choosing instead to only focus on the task at hand. It takes some wiggling, but he gets the receptacle in position and slides it back into place. Tokoyami then picks up the stack of binders and brings them to the bed. Once he's settled, he glances up at Midoriya, expectant. Left with not much else to do but follow suit, Midoriya swallows down his embarrassment and comes to sit beside his classmate. He touches the spine of the top binder with his fingertip. Labels on the sides so you know what year the articles are from. You did all this yourself. A soft flush creeps into his cheeks, and he nods sheepishly. Yeah, I tend to get obsessed with things pretty easily. Tokoyami takes another glance around the room. I could tell. The temperature of his face rises again, flooding his fair skin with color. In a desperate attempt to change the subject, he grabs a folder from the middle of the stack and flips it open. See, this year is pretty interesting because it marks the beginning of second-generation quirks. This was when quirks were still uncommon, and there was a lot of controversy over whether or not people with quirks should be allowed to have children. Most of the articles in here are about different laws and legislations that were trying to be passed. There's also interviews from several different activists, both pro-quirk and anti-quirk. May I see? Tokoyami inquires, hands hovering just over Midoriya's lap. He passes the binder over, allowing Tokoyami to have a better look at its contents. His companion lingers on the facing pages for a few moments, then thumbs to the next set. Midoriya waits for him to say something, but it doesn't happen. Instead, he continues silently flipping through, only pausing for a couple of seconds on each page. When he does finally speak, it's to ask, "Where did you find all of these?" "Online," Midoriya answers. I guess that was obvious. I got them from a bunch of different websites. The URLs should be at the top of the page. He moves a crooked finger to point it out. See, Tokoyami gives a tiny nod of acknowledgement. This must have taken you quite some time. 3 all-nighters in a row. At that revelation, Tokoyami's eyes widen, and he cocks his head to the side to fix Midoriya in his gaze. Should he be impressed? Worried? Intimidated? It was during summer break, so it was fine. Midoriya reassures. Pretty sure I had a small coma afterward. Such a restless spirit. He muses. Tokoyami blinks, as if only now realizing he'd made that comment aloud. I did not mean that as a criticism against you. It's just something I find endearing, amusing. Are you flirting, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲? That's new. I'm not. Midoriya blinks back, then raises a hand to rub his neck. Oh, yeah, I guess I just have a lot of nervous energy. You put it to good use. That comment has Midoriya perking up. You think so? Another nod answers him. Dude, you're totally flirting. Hardly. Haha. He gives a short, flustered laugh. Thanks. Tokoyami dips his head once more before closing the binder. He sits with it in his lap, not speaking, and shifts in place. The longer he sits, the more awkward the atmosphere seems to get. How are your studies? Nuo, what are you doing? That's so boring. You mean my grades? Well yes, those. He begins to fidget with the edge of the folder, but I meant more generally. How has the semester been treating you? Terrible. Well, maybe not terrible. Things were finally starting to settle down again, but he still found it hard to truly relax. How could he? Between the villain activity, mastering One for All, rescuing Eri, not to mention it seemed his classmates had already moved on from Night Eye's death. No, that wasn't fair. Most of his peers hadn't even met Night Eye. Of course they'd be less affected. Forgive me, 𝐻𝗄𝐵. He looks up sharply, Tokoyami's voice having roused him from his thoughts. Knowing all you've been through, it was inappropriate of me to ask that. I'm sorry. Tokoyami apologizes again, his tone quiet and regretful. Midoriya's eyes widen. Was it that obvious to tell what he was thinking? No, he insists, putting his hands up. You were just being polite. No need to be sorry. He allows his shoulders to slacken. We've all been through a lot this year. Certainly, Tokoyami agrees. But you haven't had the chance to properly grieve your mentor. You don't have to worry about me, Tokoyami-kun. Midoriya replies softly, I'm okay. Was he, though? Maybe not, but it didn't matter. Tokoyami wasn't his therapist. It would be wrong to dump his baggage on him, especially not when Tokoyami had his own problems. The other boy seems unconvinced, but refrains from pressing any further. Instead, he readjusts his grip on the stack he's holding and says, It's rather late. I should be taking my leave. He raises a hand to lightly touch Midoriya's shoulder. Please try to get some rest. It was a simple but meaningful gesture. Midoriya found the sweetness of it hard to stomach. All he can do is nod and answer, I'll try. Satisfied, Tokoyami nods and stands up. I'll see you in the morning, then. Night. Midoriya continues to stare at the door long after it's clicked shut, struggling to piece together where he'd gone wrong. The conversation had turned suddenly heavy, and then just as quickly Tokoyami had left. It wasn't a good place to leave off. He huffs and lays on his side, his shoulder touching the spot Tokoyami had previously occupied. Keep in mind that this is a strength training exercise. You are not allowed to use your quirks. If you're caught using your quirk, you forfeit and your sparring partner will be declared the winner. No quirks. A few months ago, he'd have been relieved, but now he's honestly a bit disappointed. There's so many new moves he wanted to work on. Oh well, maybe another time. Aizawa continues on, parsing through the instructions in the same tired, disinterested tone he usually had. I've already pre-assigned your partners to you. A chorus of boos interrupts him. All it takes is that signature glare and the class is silent again. I pre-assigned your partners based on multiple factors, such as size, speed, and overall physical ability. These matchups are designed to be fair. If you have a problem with your matchup, get over it. Blunt as always. Midoriya glances around, wondering who he'd be up against. Probably not 𝐓𝐽ji, Kuta, or Sato. They were all much bigger than he was. Not to mention they were all probably a lot stronger. Well, he'd never really seen Kuta throw a punch, but looking at the size of his forearms. The matchups are as follows. Ashido and Kirishima wait. There's girls against guys. Is that really fair? Hagakure and Kaminari. BWAHAHAH your toast. KAMINARI-kun. Please put me with a girl. Please put me with a girl. Please put me with a girl. Please put me with quiet. Class 1 again falls into nervous silence. 𝐓𝐽ji and Sato, Kuta and Bakugo. Midoriya takes a quick peek at Kuta's expression. He's terrified. Poor guy. Ada and Todoroki. Despite everyone else having gone quiet, Midoriya strains to hear, listening for his name. Asui and Ajiro, Midoriya and Tokoyami. Turning to the boy in question, he can immediately tell Tokoyami is as surprised as he is. But even beyond that, there seems to be something strange and unreadable in his gaze. His sharp, intelligent, mysterious strategy. Think strategy, Midoriya. If he recalled correctly, Tokoyami had placed 5th in the physical exams at the beginning of the school year. Pretty impressive, but there was no telling how much of that had been bolstered by his quirk. He curses himself for not having paid more attention back then. What else? There was the difference in their physiques to consider. Tokoyami was both shorter and thinner than himself, but that didn't necessarily mean it'd be easy to take him down. A smaller frame could be advantageous if used right, especially if he focused his energy on slipping out of grasp. Midoriya's best bet was to get a solid grip on Tokoyami and get him pinned as fast as possible. If he kept his weight on him, Tokoyami shouldn't be able to get free. Lost in his thoughts, he misses the cue to move out. A tap on his shoulder pulls him out of his own head. Midoriya, we need to pick a location for our spar. Oh crap, he hoped he hadn't been mumbling out loud. What if Tokoyami had heard some of it? If he did, he's not showing signs. Right, sorry, Midoriya answers with a nod, beginning to walk toward the edge of the training area. How did you sleep? I asked if you managed to get any rest last night. Oh, briefly. He considers lying to him but decides against it. Not really. I think I managed to sleep an hour or two. Tokoyami nods. You're at a disadvantage, then. Wah, Midoriya exclaims. You were just scoping out weaknesses? Geez, he should have just lied. A small ha escapes Tokoyami, a phantom of a chuckle. That was not the sole intention. I do genuinely care. Oh, he deflates, feeling a tad guilty. He'd been too quick to assume Tokoyami was his friend, after all. Or, at least, he considered Tokoyami his friend. And he hoped that the sentiment was mutual. The pair finally come upon a decent stretch of open space, one that was well away from the other groups. It'd be trouble if they accidentally got caught up in another pair's fight. As you're good, Midoriya asks, just in case. Tokoyami dips his head in assent, and they move into their respective positions, facing each other but with a few yards between them. Everybody ready? Present Mike's voice booms across the terrain. Cricket chirps. I said, is everybody ready? Yes. The class shouts back, their unified voices all pitched in annoyance. Beginning in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. STAART. Damn, that was too fast. He'd just barely gotten into his stance. With the start prompt, Midoriya takes a few steps forward, advancing but remaining alert. While he'd seen very little of his opponent's combat style, he guessed that Tokoyami's weapon of choice would be his legs, so he keeps a closer eye on those. He watches Tokoyami plant his feet, pivot, and then bolt away. Where are you going? He cries, abandoning his previous strategy to go tearing after him. Since when the hell was Tokoyami so fast? Had he always been this quick? Why hadn't he paid more attention? His shoes pound the dirt beneath him, kicking up dust with every stride, but he's not getting any closer. Wait. There had to be a reason Tokoyami was running. Midoriya begins to slow, coming down to a jog. As the realization dawns on him, he's trying to wear me out. In a battle of sheer bronze, Midoriya would be the victor. Tokoyami had figured that out pretty quickly. But if he played the long game, made his opponent waste his energy, Midoriya's movements would be sluggish and sloppy. He couldn't overpower Midoriya without his dark shadow, but he had a chance of out-finessing him. Midoriya couldn't help but to curl his lip up in a smirk. Nice move. He'd figured out the strategy, but the problem now was catching him. Until he could get in close, there was nothing he could do, except flip the script. The jog he was at now was the same tempo he used for his morning runs. If he stayed behind at this pace, Tokoyami would get wore out before him. All he had to do was keep him in sight. Keep playing hard to get, Tokoyami-kun. Well, that was a weird thought. He shakes his head vigorously. Focus, 𝗵𝗲𝗧𝗵𝗲. His opponent had begun to slow. Tired already. He glances up further ahead and realizes there's a change in terrain. They're headed for a grove of trees. Midoriya breaks back out into a sprint, desperate to keep Tokoyami in his line of vision. Once he enters the grove, he's forced into a jog again. The undergrowth kept him from moving too quickly. That'd be a hell of a way to lose. Getting pounced on after he twisted his ankle, it made him admire his classmate even more. He wants me to get reckless. Blinking to adjust his eyes to the sudden dimness, Midoriya scans his surroundings. Damn it, I lost him. He moves forward at a crawling pace, listening closely. A crunch from behind him has him whipping around, planting his feet in preparation to take a hit. Instead, he's left dumbstruck as he watches Tokoyami bolt past the spot where he himself had just entered. I ran past him without even seeing him. Lunging back into action, he goes into pursuit, screaming, 𝐹𝑟𝑖𝐺𝐺I and jerk. Ahead of him, he could see Tokoyami losing speed. He didn't have the stamina to keep running at full tilt like that. Midoriya's lungs were starting to burn, but he needed to catch up. Already he was getting closer. Closer. He juts out an arm, intending to grab his opponent's shirt. Before he can, though, Tokoyami drops from eye level, while he trips over Tokoyami, who must have also tripped. For a bewildering second, his vision is a blur of motion and twisted legs. Luckily, Midoriya's arm is already extended, and he's able to catch himself. He pushes himself back onto his knees while the boy next to him does the same. Sacrificing some balance, he quickly reaches out and gets a hand around Tokoyami's forearm. Once he's got a grip, he yanks the boy closer and uses all of his weight to fall over on top of him. 5 seconds. He just had to pin him for 5 seconds. One Tokoyami struggles beneath him, but he can't use his limbs. Midoriya has a hold on both his wrists, and he has Tokoyami's legs locked between his own. Their faces are mere inches apart, and he can feel Tokoyami's labored breath on his cheeks as it hisses out between the boy's clenched teeth. 2. 𝗔𝗫𝗏 and 𝐔𝐬𝐽. His ears ring. His vision waxes black. He blinks, stars swimming behind his eyes. Then the pain finds him. My nose. He releases Tokoyami, hand flying to his face. Already it's slick. He can feel hot blood dripping down his chin. What happened? His brain struggles to process the seconds between being in pain and not in pain. Every piece of data sent to his brain has to get through an adrenaline-induced haze. He headbutt me. Looking down, he finds that Tokoyami's as shocked as he is, eyes widened in dawning horror. Midoriya. He stammers, sitting up. I panicked. I didn't. Are you alright? I'm still gonna win. With his bloodied hand, he shoves Tokoyami's chest, forcing him to the ground. This time, he keeps his face well above his opponent's, ignoring his leaking nostrils. 1. Tokoyami flinches as Midoriya's blood hits his face and rolls off his oily feathers. 2, 3, 4, 5. Midoriya rolls off and goes straight to assessing the damage to his nose. In a slight daze, Tokoyami gets to his feet, then leans down to offer a hand. Let's get you to the nurse. Nodding, Midoriya accepts the hand and uses it to pull himself up. You got me, he wheezes, really freaking good. I know, I'm sorry. He shakes his head, then winces. Oh, don't be. Honestly, he's just grateful he'd somehow managed to avoid meeting the sharp end of Tokoyami's beak. Taking a hard peck to the face, or worse, the eye, would have been a far more gruesome injury. I hurt you, Tokoyami insists, his tone serious, before Midoriya can reply. Present Mike is jogging over to meet them, their other teacher trailing behind. Yo, 𝗵𝗲𝗧𝗵𝗲. Not looking so good. It's not that bad. Better head to the nurse. Aizawa sighs. I'll talk to you both after class. Midoriya's injury was entirely my fault. I should have exercised better self-control. I'm very sorry. Tokoyami apologizes, bowing his head to the 2 men before him. Should have hit him harder. His head snaps back up, eyes widening. I beg your pardon. After you hit him, he let you up, Aizawa explains, and let his guard down. That was a mistake. He took advantage of the fact that you're his friend and wouldn't attack him while he was injured. Midoriya only won because you went too easy on him. Hearing this, Tokoyami goes quiet again, eyes downcast. He still looks regretful, but he appears to be processing Aizawa's statement. Midoriya glances between his classmate and his homeroom teacher. He's right. If that had been a real fight and I'd let my guard down like that, I'd be done for. Tokoyami didn't even fight back when he got pinned the second time. He let me win. Get yourselves cleaned up. I'll make sure you're not counted late to your next class. The boys give their thanks and shuffle past, heads held down. Once they're gone, Yamada speaks up. That was a bit harsh. Yeah, I thought I let them have it too easy, Aizawa counters. That's not the first time Tokoyami's given up like that. he forfeited to Bakugo at the sports festival, too. Not like he could have won that. Aizawa shrugs. All I'm saying is that heroes don't have the option of just tapping out when the situation is unfavorable. For a moment, Yamada doesn't respond. Then he nods, satisfied with that answer. Right. Fair enough. Tokoyami placed 9th in the entrance exam, 5th in my physical exam, and 3rd in the sports festival. Not to mention he passed the provisional license exam with flying colors. Needless to say, he's got potential. He just needs the motivation. Slowly, a grin spreads across Yamada's face. So you're saying you're gonna keep pitting him against Midoriya? He yawns his reply, leaning to stretch his back in the process. Yup. So, Midoriya begins awkwardly. I'm sorry for, bleeding on you. Tokoyami doesn't look up, instead keeping his eyes strictly on his own feet as he peels out of his bloodied jacket. That's fine. Silence after that. Midoriya keeps his head low and focuses on shimmying into his pants. After several long, agonizing seconds of quiet, however, he's unable to stop himself from speaking up. Are we cool? Dress shirt in hand, Tokoyami pauses. What do you mean? Like, he fishes for how to continue, his words having escaped him for a second. Are we okay? You're not mad? Blinking and tilting his head, Tokoyami inquires. Shouldn't I be the one asking you that? Why? He fixes the other boy with a puzzled gaze. Because I broke your nose, Midoriya. Oh, with a light hand, he touches his face. Thanks to recovery girl, the bone was set, but the swelling remained. Well, it's fine now, like it never happened. He pokes his nose again, wincing slightly. Once the swelling goes down, I mean, it's not fine. I hurt you. It wasn't my fault. Not this time, no. It's never been me. It's been us. Because you can't control me. You can't control yourself. I don't want to think about that right now. Leave me be. Then don't think about it. How can I not? I can't answer that. Tokoyami-kun, whose hands are those? He stares, uncomprehending, at the trembling fists in front of him, fingers curled tightly into a mass of white fabric. Mine. They're mine. Something else enters his vision, foreign yet familiar at the same time. A person. Their face. Their busted nose. Their freckles. Midoriya. He jerks his head back, inhaling sharply. Too close. Should I get the nurse again? You seemed fine, so she didn't check your head, but... Tokoyami exhales, voice hoarse. What? I think you have a concussion. From when you hit me, Midoriya clarifies. He reaches up, gingerly brushing the feathers between Tokoyami's eyes with his middle and forefinger. I'm fine, he croaks. A frown on his lips suggests he isn't totally convinced. But he backs off. Or so it seems. Tokoyami gets the first couple buttons on his shirt done up when a bright light has him cringing and turning away from the source. What are you doing? Checking your pupils. Get that out of my face, he hisses, shoving Midoriya's hand, and consequently his phone's flashlight, the other way. Fine. Midoriya concedes. But if you zone out like that again, I'm taking you to recovery girl. Do what you must, just don't shine that in my eyes. Does it hurt? A little bit, yeah, Midoriya lies. The truth was his nose was still throbbing. Recovery girl had given him some ibuprofen for the pain and swelling. But it only offered marginal relief. Uraraka, not to be fooled by his brave face, croons sympathetically, poor Deku-kun. He shrugs with a slight frown. I kinda deserved it. That statement gives both of his companions pause. Ida and Uraraka stop in their tracks to peer at him through squinted eyes. I mean, Midoriya stammers, suddenly aware of just how strange that it sounded. I let my guard down. I was so sure I had him pinned I didn't even think about what he might do to get free. They seem to understand his answer and allow their hunched shoulders to drop. You'll need to be more careful in the future, Ida gently chides. This time it was an accident, but a villain wouldn't think twice about doing something so underhanded. Yeah, Midoriya sighs. I know. A hand claps his shoulder. He glances in his peripheral to see that it's Uraraka's, her pinky raised so as not to inadvertently make him float. You'll do better next time. Right. Her words tug a tiny smile out of him, and he nods back at her. Right. 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Fine, as far as I'm able to discern. Detroit Smash, are you sure? Midoriya stares hard at the italicized line of text, chewing his lip, hoping for an updated notification reading 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is online. He closes the application and launches it again. Maybe the Wi-Fi. No, stop. He's just ignoring you. That's it. A sudden tightness comes over his ribcage, and he inhales to combat it, gulping as much air as his lungs can hold. Why can't I learn to just shut up? The pressure doesn't ease. He can feel tears starting to well up, pricking at the corners of his eyes. Stop. This isn't worth crying over. A soft knock at his door has him freezing in place. Without his straining to keep them in check, the tears spill over onto his cheeks. For a long moment he doesn't move, waiting for the pounding of his heart and the heaving of his chest to subside. Be right there, he chokes out, shoving himself up with a trembling hand, balling his fingers into a fist. He drags the back of it over his eyes, scrubbing the tears from them. He takes a deep breath to compose himself before he plunges down the handle and pulls back. That steadying breath he took gets snatched out of him as soon as his wide eyes register who's on the other side. "Hello," Tokoyami greets with a dip of his head. "I thought it might put you at ease if I spoke to you in person. I hope I'm not intruding." His voice is quiet and tentative. Nervous, he wrings his hands together and shifts his weight. Midoriya's brain ceases to function for a couple ticks, then sputters back to life. "Come in," he says a bit too loudly, throwing the door open wide. Tokoyami hesitates, having sudden regrets about his decision to continue their conversation face to face. He glances up, gauging Midoriya's expression. There's a soft flush to his cheeks and a wet gleam in his eyes. He's been crying. Not unusual for Midoriya, Dark Shadow reminds him. No, but something's off. He toes into the bedroom and waits for Midoriya to be seated before he joins him. "Should have worn socks," he laments, resisting the urge to draw his feet up onto the bed and bury them under one of Midoriya's blankets. There's a lapse of silence between the pair, each reluctant to be the first to break it. Midoriya rotates his arm brace around his bicep, growing ever more self-conscious. Finally, he speaks up, "Thanks for, coming to talk to me." Tokoyami nods and grunts, acknowledging the statement. After a moment he says, "You seem upset." "Huh," Midoriya starts, cursing himself for being so easy to read. "No," he shakes his head, "I'm not upset." A hand raises to rub his neck. "I guess I'm just tired." "Yeah, like he's gonna believe that. You mentioned before that you've had trouble sleeping." "Oh wow, he actually bought it." Well, maybe that was actually something to do with why he was so emotional. Not that he wasn't normally emotional, but being so tired probably wasn't helping. It's just," he pauses, fishing for the right words, "hard for me to relax. My brain is always busy." "I can empathize. I often have the same problem," Tokoyami replies. His admission piques Midoriya's interest, and it prompts him to ask, "How do you deal with it?" A thoughtful hum comes from the boy next to him. "I don't have any foolproof method, but I find meditation helpful." Midoriya deflates, not able to hide his disappointment. Oh, meditation was commonly suggested in what he'd read, but even with his best effort he never found it relaxing. How could it be? During meditation you had to clear your head. But how was he supposed to do that when he had thoughts about clearing his head in his head? He could never focus on nothing. Only focus on the concept of focusing on nothing. Tokoyami, however, is not dissuaded by Midoriya's reaction. Meditation doesn't have to be done the way it's shown on TV. You don't have to sit uncomfortably in silence. I'm just using the word as a general term. How do you meditate, then? Usually with some kind of ambient noise, a video of a thunderstorm, or even quiet music, Tokoyami answers. And I count my breathing. It's easier to focus on counting than trying fruitlessly to have a clear mind. With his interest returned, Midoriya nods. His fingers twitch, and he suddenly hops up from the bed. "I should write this down. You're taking notes on this?" "I sure am," Midoriya declares, pulling a piece of loose paper from his desk drawer. A few moments later he returns with his materials in hand and plops down onto the mattress. Tokoyami watches as he begins to write in sloppy hiragana. "What kind of music do you listen to when you meditate?" The question seems to throw Tokoyami off, and he blinks in surprise. "I'm not sure that my tastes would match your own. It might be better to tailor the music to your own liking." Midoriya sounds doubtful. "I don't think the stuff I like would be good for it." He clicks his pen a few times. "I listen to music that gets me kinda pumped up, you know. For when I work out or study, it's not really relaxing." With a nod, Tokoyami acknowledges the argument, but remains quiet. Midoriya waits for Tokoyami to speak, and waits, and waits. Tokoyami gazes back at him just as expectantly. He's not budging. "Do you have a playlist?" he asks, hoping that will get him the response he wants. "I do. Can you send me it?" "I'm more stubborn than you, Tokoyami-kun." There's a long moment of hesitation before the other boy reluctantly takes out his phone. Leaning closer, Midoriya attempts to peek at the screen, but Tokoyami tilts it away from him. Not long after, his own device buzzes with a hero chat notification. Triumphant, he smiles and issues an earnest, "Thanks, MMH." Midoriya clicks his pen a few more times, musing over his sheet of notes. "What else did you say?" "Something about counting breaths. How do you do that?" Tokoyami shifts in his seat, drawing his legs up so he can sit cross-legged. "I do 4, 7, 8, he answers. "Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8, and then repeat as many times as necessary." The numbers 4, 7, and 8 are scratched onto the page in big, bold font. Below them, Midoriya writes inhale, hold, exhale. He then peers back up, another question on his lips. "Where'd you learn all this stuff, by the way? Is there a website you can send me?" It wasn't the kind of inquiry Tokoyami had been ready to answer, so it takes him a couple extra seconds to process it. "Unfortunately, no, though I don't think it would be hard to find better instructions for a similar method." His hands ring together in his lap. I learned this exercise from my therapist. Midoriya pauses, and then his expression softens. I'm glad you're getting help, Tokoyami-kun. Was that weird to say? Maybe he shouldn't have made that comment after all. I haven't. Tokoyami hesitates again. Gone in a while. Almost 2 years. He then adds, but thank you. Why not? His eyes widen, and he quickly looks down to his own lap. Almost as quickly as the question had slipped out, Midoriya is smacking a hand over his own mouth. From behind it, he babbles, oh God, I'm sorry. That was so nosy, I shouldn't have asked. I'm really sorry. I mean, it's not like it's any of my business. I don't even know why I thought that was okay, because it's definitely not. It just came out of nowhere. I didn't think. Even less thinking, his words become less and less intelligible, running together until they're virtually indistinguishable from one another. Stop that. And it's totally 𝐒𝐻𝐽𝐽𝐽𝐽𝐽. Just one apology is enough. I don't need you to explain yourself. Midoriya goes quiet, uncertain of how he should interpret that. Tokoyami wasn't easy to read, and he couldn't tell if that statement had been meant as a polite shoot-up or as a reassurance. It had been spoken softly, so probably the latter. Sorry. Tokoyami squints at him. Sore. He covers his lips again, hoping to steer the conversation back on course. Tokoyami asks, did you have any other questions? Regarding meditation, I mean. A small shake of the head. Reaching over, Tokoyami grasps his friend's wrist and gingerly peels his fingers away from his mouth. For several more ticks, there's no response. Midoriya has to wait for the hamster to get back on the wheel. When it does, he squeaks as if possessed by it. Wow. He whips his head to the clock on his wall. Sure is getting late. Oh God, what just even? I am so stupid. Having followed his gaze, Tokoyami nods in agreement. I shouldn't keep you up any later than this. Oh, what am I doing? I didn't say that to kick you out. The other boy shakes his head. I can't in good conscience impede you from getting rest. How do I manage to keep screwing this up so bad? That thought only adds to his confusion. What was I even trying to do in the first place? Midoriya. At the sound of his name, he jerks into alertness, startled. Breathe. I don't breathe on my count. Tokoyami insists. 1. He inhales. 2, 3, 4. Hold. He holds his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale. He exhales. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Midoriya wakes the following morning to find his body in a weird position. He's sprawled across his mattress perpendicular to the length of it with his legs dangled off the edge. His stiff limbs protest as he sits up and begins to try and sort himself out. How'd I end up like this? The last thing he remembered was Tokoyami counting. Oh crap, I must have fallen asleep during that. He fumbles for his phone, wanting to know the time. 9:23 a.m. I quote him late for wait. It's 𝐒𝐵. His shoulders untense, and he exhales in relief. Looking around now, he realizes the only light is that which filters in through the window. Tokoyami must have turned off the lamp for me. Come to think of it, he'd just unplugged his phone from the charger, meaning Tokoyami had previously put it on there. I should thank him. Midoriya unlocks his phone and boots up Hero Chat to find an unread notification. He stares at the external link uncomprehendingly for a short moment before remembering that Tokoyami had sent him his meditation playlist. Tapping the link with his thumb, he waits to get redirected to the YouTube app and then reads the title of the list. Sounds of Somnolence. Yeah, that definitely seemed like something Tokoyami would come up with. All of the song titles are in English, a fact that surprises Midoriya. Outside of their English class, Tokoyami rarely used the language. He didn't even borrow from its idioms or metaphors. Maybe he was self-conscious about how his English sounded. If I had a voice that's sexy, I don't think I'd be self-conscious about anything I said. He feels compelled to defend his own thought. I mean, it is sexy. Nothing wrong with saying that, right? It's just the truth, even without being able to see his own face. He can tell it's getting red. There's something seriously wrong with me. In desperate need of a distraction, he presses the play button with a bit more force than necessary. To his great annoyance, however, he's forced to wait for an ad. Ugh. Thankfully, it's a short one, and he's able to get to the actual song fairly quickly. The intro is simple, just some guitar strings and a few piano notes. And are those real angels in the magazines? Oh, is there a heaven? You'd know now you've been. Are those real stars that hang in the sky? Or are they man-made, a trick of the light? Amen, 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 huh. This song sounded a little sad. Or maybe it just seemed that way because it was in a less familiar language. He pauses the video and slides his hand around the top of his bedside table until he finds a pair of earbuds to put in. And is there a God up there? If so, where does he hide? Cause the devil is raging inside my mind. And is there a moment where it all makes sense? When saying goodbye doesn't feel like the end. Nope, this was definitely a sad song. Amen, amen, amen. Sometimes I can't help blaming you for leaving me here. What am I supposed to do? There's plenty of women, there's drink and there's drugs, but we both know that won't be enough. The sudden crescendo into the next verse hits Midoriya in his core, and he swears his heartstrings are being plucked right along with the guitar chords. "'Cause I see you in the daytime, and I hear you at night. There's a pale imitation burnt in my eyes. I don't want to be here. I don't know what to do. Sometimes I'd rather be dead. At least then I'm with you. Amen. Amen, 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 amen." He closes the application and rests his phone on top of his breast, staring up at the ceiling. How did Tokoyami find that relaxing? It just makes me want to cry. Actually, reaching up, he brushes his fingers over his cheek. Oh God, I'm crying. No, no, please. Tears pour in rivulets from his wide eyes, repelling off his feathers and onto the collar of his shirt. Please, no. He pulls against her grasp, but her fingers are locked like a vice around his wrist. You know what the rules are, 𝗵𝗃𝐻. She sounds exasperated, annoyed. Bad boys go in timeout. Don't. He's losing his breath, airways constricted as his chest fills with fear. Don't put me in there. Her grasp only tightens on his trembling body as she continues to haul him through the English-style parlor, ignoring the look of concern the maid shoots them as they pass. 𝗵𝗃𝐻's wails are stubbornly ignored as she all but throws the closet door open. She releases his wrist just long enough to shove him through. Please, 𝐒𝐻𝐢𝐳𝐻𝐿. It's so scary. The door shuts in his face, muffling his cries only somewhat. Tokoyami-sen, leave him. But leave him, Kyoko. It's the only way he learns. Michiko's voice is cold, betraying no sympathy. He'll calm down before my husband gets home if he knows what's good for him. Where are you going? She doesn't look up, focused instead on stuffing her feet into her shoes. I'll be back soon. I can't stand hearing him scream like that. The wailing continues, drowning out the sound of an engine revving to life in the drive outside. Kyoko pushes aside the curtain, peering through the window and watching the small black car disappear around the bend. Even after it's gone, she keeps watching, waiting, her skin prickling with agitation. A high, blood-chilling shriek finally startles her from the spot. Following the scream comes a series of bangs, all from within the closet. 𝗵𝗃𝐻. She lurches for the door, concerned for the boy's safety. He must have hit his head on something. Just before she reaches the closet, it bursts open, and she loses her balances with a startled gasp. She hits the hardwood floor, legs sprawling, but quickly pulls herself into a sit. Kyoko stares into the closet, her eyes wide in horror and her face draining of all color. No words come forth from her lips, no scream from her throat. She's paralyzed by the sight of the black, writhing mass inside. Kyoko-san. A tiny, pained voice whimpers. 𝗵𝗃𝐻. She breathes out, using a hand to slowly lever herself up. A glowing, yellow eye suddenly snaps to attention and fixes itself on her. Freezing, Kyoko gazes up at it. For several long, torturous seconds the only sound is that of her own heart pounding, threatening to break free of her ribcage. Then the creature lunges at her. She screams as 𝗵𝗃𝐻's dark shadow traps her wrists in its talons and looms over her. It leans closer, closer. Its enormous maw stretches wide open, and it screams back at her. An awful, disembodied noise that was somehow the shriek of a child and a demon combined. There's no air left in her lungs. She can't breathe, can only close her eyes and tremble. Please, don't hurt, Kyoko-san. Abruptly, the pressure on her wrists disappears, as does the presence above her. Kyoko's too petrified to move right away, and she only risks cracking an eye open in time to watch dark shadow retreat from the room, 𝗵𝗃𝐻 grasped in its massive talons. I hate you, 𝗵𝗃-chan. I hate you, he screams, voice raw and cracking. You're mean, and you get me in trouble, and you hurt me. The creature visibly wilts, shrinking down a size. It's your fault I get in trouble. 𝗵𝗃𝐻 continues. It's your fault we have to go in timeout. And he inhales, fighting back his own sobs. And it's your fault 𝐒𝐻𝐢𝐳𝐻 left. I didn't mean to scare her. Dark shadow whimpers. He can feel his head pounding, swimming, his heart hammering, his chest heaving. You did. You're mean, and you won't let me have any friends. You scared them all away, and that's why Michiko-san says we can't go to school. At this accusation, Dark Shadow's demeanor flips from timid to aggressive, almost like a switch. You're mean, 𝗵𝗃𝐻. You're just as mean as me. He roars back, puffing back up with indignance. No, 𝗵𝗃𝐻 chokes on the word, his weak legs giving out under him. He crumples to the floor, sputtering and desperate to get air into his lungs, the weight of his grief and anger having become too heavy to bear. His quirk continues to grow, fueled by his pain. You're bad. Dark Shadow's black body swells until it engulfs that of 𝗵𝗃𝐻, smothering him in their shared anguish. We're bad. I'm not bad. Even to himself the words sound hollow. Your foster mother tells me you're trying public school again. Are you excited to go back? Feeling shy today? Ishido hums. Tokoyami slowly lifts his gaze away from the pillow which edges he'd been picking. I'm worried. And why are you worried? He tugs at a corner, and then rubs the fabric between his thumb and forefinger. I haven't gone in 4 years. Ishido leans forward slightly, letting his patient know he's listening. Are you worried you're not prepared? There's a small lapse of silence, and then a nod. What does her tutor think? I don't know. Ishido pauses to shift some papers in his lap, and then says, do you think you could ask Harada-san, was it, to help you get ready? Another lapse, another nod. I know middle school can be scary, but it's less so when you have good company. Are you excited to make new friends? No, I want friends. You scare them away. You scare them away. Nobody ever sees me. You misbehave. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝐿. He looks up sharply, startled. Is he talking to you? His head dips, affirming. Clicking his pen, Ishido marks a quick note. And what is he saying? He wants me to make friends. His therapist scrawls something else onto the page, and 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝐿 finds himself wishing he could see what was being written. What was in those notes? What did Ishido think of him? Who was being shown those notes? And what did they, in turn, think? That's good to hear. Ishido smiles earnestly and adds, you've come a long way, 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝐿. I'm sure you'll be just fine. And of course I'll be here to talk to when you need me. You've come a long way, 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝐿. Was that really true? He wanted to believe it, to trust Ishido, but doubt took root too quickly. There was no room for such praise to flower in his mind. A paper cutout moon, pasted into a pitch sky. Himself cradled in the curve of it, gazing down upon the nothingness below. Exhale, 2 yellow suns rising behind his moon. Inhale, their stare burning into him. Hold, the suns shrinking, down, into a pair of fireflies, blinking in unison, suspended in a crackling thundercloud. Exhale, wake up, 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝐿. Tokoyami's eyes widen upon seeing the message preview on his screen. Something from Midoriya. At this hour, even for a school morning, this was early. It was only because of his fitful sleeping habits that he himself was awake. Cute, you got it so bad for him. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. How can I not? We literally share the same tiny brain. It's not tiny. It feels tiny when we're both in here. Go to sleep, then. Bastard. How about you go to sleep, and I take over? Not happening. Ooh, party pooper. It's not a party if you're the only one having fun. Not that you'd know. When have you ever been to a real party? Our birthday. 𝐒𝐬𝐚𝐴 count. You just sit quietly at the table while a bunch of people we don't even fucking know talk about bullshit. And I'm not even allowed to be there. Tokoyami tenses up, aware of the sudden tonal shift. Those are our mother's rules. Not mine. She's not our mother. Don't be so ungrateful. Anger suddenly boiling in his stomach. Be calm. The sensation only intensifies. And he quickly rolls over on his side, clutching his gut and wincing at the painful way dark shadow twists and claws around in his insides. Please, aren't you angry? Doesn't it just piss you off? The creature swells, threatening to rip his host's body at the seams. I don't want to be angry. All at once his entrails are catching flame. Burning. His heart's pumping gasoline. Why the hell not? What makes you too good to be angry? Because it's hurting me. As quickly as it had sparked, the flame goes out. Tokoyami exhales and detects something bitter in his throat. It's bile, but he could swear it had the same taste as smoke. I'm sorry. He doesn't answer. Instead he begins his counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. His phone buzzes against his breast, causing a slight hitch in his breath. He flips it over, squinting at the screen. Tokoyami stares at the text for a long moment, as if he doubted that he'd read it correctly. Slowly he begins to type out a reply. Detroit smash, okay. Honestly, after the pain he'd just experienced, he doubted he could actually stomach very much food, and yet he couldn't justify declining Midoriya's invitation. Just as he gets his legs swung over the edge of the mattress, another vibration alerts him to a new message. Sometimes Midoriya's kindness was hard to bear. Vaguely he wonders what good deed he'd done to deserve said kindness this morning. Detroit smash, too late. I already started it. His thumbs hover over the keypad while he struggles to think of an adequate response. Nothing comes to mind, so he sets aside his phone so he can focus on getting dressed. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝐿, I don't want to talk. Leave me be. I'm sorry. You keep saying that. He can feel dark shadows guilt filling him. Glacier melt pouring over the still hot coals in his stomach, turning them cold. Tokoyami continues to slowly dress, pulling on a pair of sweats and a hoodie. He'd bother with his school uniform when it was closer to class time. Moving to the bathroom, he stops to examine himself in the mirror, and then spends a few minutes grooming his feathers into place. There was nothing to be done, however, about the dull, listless stare of his eyes. All the way down the hall his feet drag, his footsteps falling heavier than normal, as if he were carrying a body that wasn't his own. He passes the rooms of his still slumbering classmates and is again reminded of the sheer ungodliness of the hour. Liminal space. His brain supplies the phrase, and he's inclined to agree. Liminal space indeed. The elevator is avoided, and he instead continues to the stairs. Tokoyami never took the elevator. Too cramped, too suffocating, too much like He shakes his head, banishing the idea before it can manifest into something more than just a fleeting thought. Luckily, his room was on the second floor, meaning there was only one flight down to the commons. Before he exits the stairwell, he checks his phone again, half expecting a new message waiting for him. No such notification appears, so he pockets the device and continues on through the empty lobby. The kitchen light is on, and already he can smell the rich, robust scent of fresh brewed coffee. As he approaches, his heart begins to beat a little faster. Midoriya is seated with his chair pulled up to the island and his back to the doorway, slouched forward. He doesn't seem to notice his classmate's entrance. After observing a moment longer, Tokoyami clears his throat. This gets Midoriya's attention, and he turns in his seat to greet his friend. "Mornin'," he says, voice cheery in spite of the dark circles under his eyes. Tokoyami nods once in reply, then moves to the chair beside Midoriya's. A scarred hand pushes a steaming mug closer to Tokoyami. "I didn't put any sugar in it," Midoriya warns. To his surprise, Tokoyami finds that there's already a straw in his drink. It was a small gesture, something that probably didn't mean much, but the sight of it makes his heart squeeze. "Thank you," he mumbles, curling his fingers loosely around the mug. The heat of it soaks into him until the warmth of his palms matches the warmth in his breast. "No problem." Then, with a nod toward the rice cooker, Midoriya says, "I'm gonna just make tamago gohan. You can have some of my rice." Tamago gohan sounded as good as anything. Easy to make, easy to stomach. MMH. He dips his head in thanks. You sure you don't want to go back to bed? You look exhausted." 𝐻MPH. "What? Hypocrite that you are to be the one to tell me that." "Oh." Midoriya lifts a forefinger to scratch his chin. "I guess I do look like crap, huh?" Before Tokoyami can answer, his eyes bulge in dawning horror. Not that you look like crap. You look great. I mean, tired, yeah, but great. No offense taken." Reassured, Midoriya's shoulders untense. He smiles softly and takes a sip from his own cup. When he sets it back down, Tokoyami gets a peek at the contents. Something light tan in color. Milk tea. A shake of the head. "It's coffee. I just put a lot of cream and sugar in it." Tokoyami eyes the beverage with cautious scrutiny. How much sugar is a lot? His companion's lip curls up into a slightly sheepish grin, and he gives his mug a push, signaling for Tokoyami to try it. He squints at the barely brown substance even harder before hesitantly transferring his straw to it. As soon as the liquid reaches his mouth, he recoils. It tasted like pure cane syrup. Tokoyami would argue it didn't even classify as coffee anymore. Midoriya laughs, amused by the sight of Tokoyami's normally impassive face screwing up in disgust. Desperate to rid his palate of the overwhelming saccharine taste, he quickly returns his straw back to his own cup and takes a hearty swallow of pure, black coffee. Didn't like it. Not even in the slightest. Midoriya chuckles again, a lovely, mirthful sound, and then suddenly scoots his chair back. "Rice is done," he explains as he gets up and walks over to the cabinet. From it he retrieves 2 ceramic bowls. After watching for a moment, Tokoyami likewise rises from his chair and heads to the refrigerator to get the eggs and soy sauce. On his way back, Midoriya steps in his path and bumps his shoulder with his own. Confused, he looks up sharply only to find his friend smirking. So that was a friendly gesture, then? He's flirting with you, dumbass. Aren't you supposed to be asleep? No, yes, no, you'd best behave. I will." Although he isn't entirely convinced, Tokoyami lets the matter drop and quietly returns to his seat. Midoriya rejoins him not much later and places a bowl of rice, as well as a set of chopsticks, in front of him. "Thank you," he replies quietly. His friend smiles and nods, reaching past him to get an egg. He taps it on the counter, and then cracks it over his bowl. "Ugh, what's wrong?" Midoriya looks up at him, and then back down to his rice with a frustrated expression. "I cracked it too hard. I got shell bits in it." Following his gaze, Tokoyami confirms that, indeed, there were eggshells in his dish. Wordlessly, he takes up his chopsticks and begins picking them out. "I can do it myself," Midoriya insists, shooing Tokoyami's hand away. There's a pink tinge to his cheeks. "I embarrassed him." "No duh. He's a big boy. He can do it himself." 𝗵𝗃𝗏. Tokoyami leaves his friend to salvage his dish and instead focuses on doctoring his own meal. Glistening yellow yolk plops onto his rice, followed seconds later by a light shower of soy sauce. He stirs the ingredients together, whipping it into a lumpy paste, and then delivers a hearty bite of the mixture to his beak. "I'm hungrier than I thought. You surprised me." Tokoyami places the lid back onto the steaming pot of gyoza and turns his head to address the boy who'd just entered the room. MMH. "How so?" 𝐲𝐸 moves over to the island and pushes aside one of the chairs, making room for his multiple arms, while he settles into another. Once he's made himself comfortable, he'll explain. "You're not one to like attention. It surprised me that you volunteered to be in the band. I'm only the bass guitarist." His fingers reach for the little egg-shaped timer one Uraraka had donated for communal use, and he turns the dial to the 10-minute mark before setting it back on the countertop. Better me than 𝗵𝗲𝗏? No. Yeah, 𝐎𝐻𝐢𝐵 won't have to worry about you trying to cop a feel during practice, that's for sure. Is that honestly the first thing you think about? We were both thinking it. Fair enough, 𝐎𝐻𝑢𝐵 agrees. But you'll still be up on the main stage. You're bound to attract some attention. Maybe. From Tokoyami's tone, 𝐎𝐻𝑢𝐵 can tell that he's not keen on the subject. Respectfully, he allows it to drop. Instead, he opts for a different topic. They want to use 𝐎𝐻𝐢𝐵 as a disco ball. Tokoyami's eyes widen a few degrees, and he tilts his head, waiting for further extrapolation. They're going to hang him from the rafters, like a pinata. Tokoyami muses under his breath. They're not going to beat him, 𝐎𝐻𝑢𝐵 replies incredulously. At least, I hope not. Leaning back, Tokoyami puts his weight against the counter and folds his arms over his chest. A public execution would certainly make for a memorable evening, if that's what they're aiming for. 𝐎𝐻𝑢𝐵 fixes him with a gaze that's caught between amusement and reproving. That's dark, even for you. If we're going to beat anyone, it should be 𝗵𝗲𝗏, a third voice, feminine, interjects. The pair of boys look up sharply to identify the source, Jiryu. Her lips are set in a frown, and there's a tired look in her eyes. What's he done now? She answers with a groan while shuffling over to the cabinets. Nothing. He's just. It takes her a second to choose her words. Whining, Jiryu turns briefly to make eye contact with Tokoyami. He's mad you replaced him. His eyes lower into an unreadable squint. When he speaks, it's in an even tone. Perhaps he should speak to me directly about it, then. A derisive laugh escapes her. Yeah, no, not gonna happen. He's probably still too scared to be anywhere near you after last semester when Dark Shadow almost mauled him at the amusement park. Hearing this from Jiryu surprises Tokoyami. How did you know about that? He deserved it. It is not a heroic action to maim our classmates, you fiend. Glass in hand, she moves to the faucet. Kaminari told me, she says with a shrug. Then she looks up very suddenly. Hey, you're not gonna bail out on me, right? Her words have him stiffening. It sounded like an accusation. No, don't assume that. Oh, she seems to realize how that had come across. I didn't mean it like that. I just don't know who else would take your spot if you decide you're not into it. Jiryu steps around the corner of the island table and apologetically claps his shoulder. Sorry, didn't mean to sound so pushy. It's fine, he reassures. You're gonna be at band practice tomorrow, then? I will. Some of the tension visibly leaves her, and her frown melts into a tiny smile. Thanks, man. I'm gonna need you. She touches his shoulder again, this time bumping it with her fist. I'll see ya. He'll watch her back as it retreats from the room and out of his line of sight. I'm so excited, Uraraka announces with a clap of her hands, pinkies out to either side. Yes, Ida enthusiastically agrees. Lunch hour is an exciting time, Uraraka-kun. At that, the air goes rushing past her lips in a loud pffftttt. Her fingers fly to her mouth to stifle it, but her laughter continues bubbling out. I meant about the culture festival, silly. His back straightens as he becomes aware of his own misunderstanding. Right, of course. Midoriya presses his knuckles to his own lips, hiding his grin behind it until he's recovered enough to speak. You're both also on the dance team, right? Uraraka nods, her voluminous hair bouncing with emphasis. Yeah, we'll all three be out there together. She pauses a moment, and her expression briefly falters. I'm not really good at dancing, but neither am I. Midoriya interjects. But that's why Ashido-sen's teaching us, yeah. Her smile returns easily enough, and she nods again. She's a really good instructor. If anyone can teach us, it'd be her. Agreed. But first we need a schedule for the next month. It will have to factor in time for studying and homework, but not cut too late into the evening, lest we deprive ourselves of proper rest. Ada speaks with his brows slightly furrowed, slipping deeper into his own thoughts with every step toward the cafeteria. I'm sure you'll come up with something, Midoriya reassures. Meanwhile, Uraraka seems to not have noticed her companion's sudden hyper-focused state. I can't wait to find out what the band is doing. Her eyes practically sparkle as she considers the possibilities. And I didn't know Tokoyami-kun could play guitar. Did you? Midoriya shakes his head. Come to think of it, there was a lot he didn't know about Tokoyami. He was, in general, a pretty mysterious guy. At first he thought it was a conscious choice of Tokoyami's to keep himself as inscrutable as possible. But at some point he realized that wasn't exactly the case. Tokoyami seemed to just be kind of shy, really. The real mystery was what he had to be shy about. He had an amazing quirk, a great sense of decor, a sword in his room. What's this about a sword? Ida was staring at him intensely. Oh God, was I saying all that out loud? A quick glance at his companions' faces. Ida's austere, Uraraka's puzzled, confirmed that, yes, he'd been muttering out loud. Again, damn it. He throws his hands out in front of his face, protecting it from the heat of Ida's gaze. And nothing. Having any kind of unregistered equipment, especially something so dangerous, is a violation of our school's safety protocol. Who knows what could happen? I don't know that it's real. Midoriya protests as sweat begins to bead on his brow. Tokoyami-kun's gonna hate me if 𝐒𝐸𝐽 gets his stuff confiscated. And besides, he hastily throws in, is a sword really all that dangerous? 𝐒𝐸𝐽's glare nearly stops him in his tracks, but Midoriya forges on nonetheless when compared to Dark Shadow. I mean, don't you think a giant shadow monster is a bigger deal? Unfortunately, 𝐒𝐸𝐽 had already made up his mind. Dark Shadow isn't liable to fall into the wrong hands, but a sword most certainly could. Besides that, it's illegal to own one without documentation. I simply must look into this. Detroit smash, not on purpose. Midoriya sits, leg bouncing, chewing his lip, waiting for his friend's reply. Oh crap. Oh, that wasn't so bad. He'd been worried for no reason. HHH. Simultaneously, Uraraka and 𝐒𝐸𝐽 snap their heads in his direction. Deku-kun, what's with that look? Tokoyami glances away from his phone and up at the boy occupying the seat across from him. What do you mean? You're smiling. I'm not. I know you are, 𝐎𝐸𝐽𝐫 argues. He meets 𝐎𝐸𝐽𝐫's gaze, schooling his features back into their usual, impassive state. From a couple tables over, he hears it. A sharp, piercing cry of distress. HHH. His eyes squint while the fleshy, more elastic part of his beak twitches. 𝐎𝐸𝐽𝐫 glances from Tokoyami to the table the cry had come from, and then back again. What have you done? -18, 19. Who's missing? Toru-chan is still putting on her costume. I think, Asui answers. Zero pipes up, tone incredulous, still. It's just boots and gloves. Anybody ever think about how she's just 𝗂𝐴𝐴𝐵𝐵𝐺HGHHH? Mind his commentary is quickly cut off by 𝐎𝐸𝐽𝐫, who claps a hand over his mouth and then tucks him under an armpit. From behind his extra appendages there's a muffled cry of, "No, not the punishment pit. Be good, and I'll think about letting you out." 𝐎𝐸𝐽𝐫 hisses through an extra mouth that forms at the end of one of the arms. I'm not waiting. We'll start without 𝐒𝐽𝐽𝐫 coming. Aizawa's mouth clamps shut, and he exhales through his nose. Join the rest of the class. Quietly, in a hushed yell, Hagakure replies, "Yes, Aizawa-sensei." His lower eyelid twitches, but he waits for her to take her place beside Ashido before he continues. Today is another one-on-one combat training exercise, similar to what you did last week. This time, however, you are permitted to use your quirks, as well as any equipment you have incorporated into your costumes. Put your hand down until I'm done. 𝐒𝐸𝐽𝐫, your opponent has already been chosen for you. Groans of protest follow the latter announcement. Shoot up. The class begrudgingly hushes. Each of you will also be given a roll of capture tape similar to what you've used before. Aizawa continues. Your goal is to restrain your opponent with the tape. His eyes travel over the pack of students. After a moment, he sighs and reluctantly asks, "Any questions?" 𝐒𝐸𝐽𝐫's hand shoots skyward. 𝐒𝐸𝐽𝐫, I assume that, realistically, there would be pressure to have a villain successfully restrained before police arrive to conduct their investigation. Will there be a time constraint to reflect this? You get 10 minutes. Anything else? No, thank you. 𝐒𝐸𝐽𝐫 jerks his head down into a quick bow. Without waiting for any more inquiries from the rest of the class, Aizawa digs into his pocket. He produces a small pack of paper, which he then unfolds. The matchups are as follows. Kuta and Aoyama. Midoriya glances at Kuta to discover he looks relieved. Must be a lot better than fighting Kaken. Asui and 𝐎𝐸𝐽𝐫, oh geez. He's so much bigger than her. 𝐒𝐸𝐽𝐫 and Bakugo, his eyebrows shoot up. That'll be interesting. Too bad I'll be too busy with my own fight to watch. Kaminari and Jiru, don't worry, I'll go easy on you. Oh, so you'll shock yourself half stupid instead of full stupid? Great. 𝐸𝐽𝐫, that's mean. Sensing Aizawa's sharp gaze on them, the two go quiet. Midoriya and Tokoyami-kun. Again, the boy in question was standing only a few feet to his left. Upon turning, Midoriya catches his eye. Tokoyami dips his beak toward him in acknowledgement, then returns his attention to Aizawa. Meanwhile, Aizawa continues listing off the rest of the pairs. Midoriya, however, doesn't hear what they are. Instead, he stands with knitted brows, diving deep into thought. His pinky idly traces the side of his nose. He hadn't forgotten how easily Tokoyami had broken it. Aizawa-sensei said we could use any of our equipment on top of using our quirks. I've got my utility belt, which has a keychain flashlight, but I'll have to be careful about when and where I use it. It's not very powerful, so if I use it from the very start they'll just figure out how to avoid it. I have to wait for the right moment, when I've gotten in close. He drops his hands and then wrings them together at his waist. The problem is Dark Shadow's incredible stamina. Even at the sports festival, which had taken place in the late morning, he was able to successfully defend not only Tokoyami-kun but also Hatsume-san, Uraraka-san, and me for almost the entire cavalry battle. Even after taking multiple shocks from Kaminari-kun's lightning, he still managed to keep us safe. The corner of his lip twitches involuntarily into a smile. They're an amazing pair. I'll have to be careful. If I don't keep my guard up, I'm toast. Seems we're fated to clash once more. 𝐒𝐽𝐽𝐫. Midoriya startles out of his thoughts and looks up sharply to find Tokoyami at his shoulder. I already let my guard down. Damn it. Oh, yeah, he rubs his neck, embarrassed at having to be pulled out of his own head yet again. It's funny we're getting a rematch so soon. Midoriya then composes himself and manages a slight smirk. Don't go easy on me this time. Okay, I won't. Tokoyami's immediate, blunt reply sends a tingle shooting up Midoriya's spine, and it was difficult to discern what emotion it was based in. Fear, excitement, both. Oh, right, he stammers, smile wavering. I'll pick up our tape rolls if you want to go claim our sparring location, Tokoyami offers. Yeah, Midoriya answers with perhaps too much enthusiasm. Yeah, I'll go do that. He points with both forefingers, then scuttles away before Tokoyami can see him start to sweat. Why am I so weird? He surveys the area, considering his options. Since their first fight had only relied on their physical combat abilities, Midoriya hadn't put much thought into the terrain. This time, however, would be much different. He could choose a spot with only flat ground, which would make visibility easier and give himself plenty of room to move. But it would also mean he wouldn't be able to take cover if he got overwhelmed by Dark Shadow's attacks. On the other hand, if he chose, say, the forest, he'd have cover, but Tokoyami would most certainly be at a greater advantage. After all, he was small, quiet, and cloaked in black, practically designed for stealth. Not to mention Dark Shadow would become stronger in the shade. No, the forest was definitely out of the question. Turning the other way, he spots something familiar, a rocky alcove. It was one he'd practiced his shoot style in many times before. Of course, that was perfect. The large boulders would provide cover, but there was no foliage overhead to block the midday sun. Additionally, he'd have the advantage of knowing the terrain better since it was a place where he often trained. He begins to trek toward it. Shouldn't have let me pick, Tokoyami-kun. Again, his mouth curls into that strange, crooked smirk. I'll let him choose our spot next time. Wait, next time? Would there be another time after this? I mean, probably. We're classmates. Midoriya shakes his head, trying to regain focus. That's not important right now. Looking behind himself, he sees Tokoyami, in all his ebony glory, slowly making his way over. Although he's certain Tokoyami's already seen him, he still raises a hand and pauses, waiting for his friend to catch up. Tokoyami seems nonchalant, and he doesn't appear to pick up any speed. He continues walking at an almost leisurely pace. Watching him approach, Midoriya is reminded that there was something about Tokoyami's hero outfit that gave him the vaguest sense of nostalgia. It was something that he'd think about off and on, but couldn't put a finger on. What was it? As he continues to gaze upon the dark cloak and clunky boots, he thinks of rain. So that was it. Tokoyami's costume reminded him of himself, as a boy, running out into the world with his enormous poncho and rubber galoshes, splashing, trying to find the biggest puddle to jump in, his messy hair plastered to his forehead. He feels a profound question ready to part his lips and slip free of them. Did you ever play in the rain, Tokoyami-kun? But he bites down on it. I can't just ask him that with no context. He'll think I'm a crazy person. Right, he probably already thinks I'm crazy. Instead he asks, you ready to start? Tokoyami nods in affirmation, then extends his hand, holding out a roll of capture tape to Midoriya. Midoriya accepts the tape from him and stows it in his utility belt for the time being. With the both of them properly equipped, they move into their respective positions several yards away from one another. After the start is announced, Tokoyami will have to bring Dark Shadow out. It's only a tiny window, so I'll have to concentrate one for all in my legs to close as much distance as possible. President Mike's voice booms from across the arena, broadcasting loud and clear to all of Class 1A. Yo, is everybody ready? Pause. Crickets chirping. I said, is everybody ready? Yes. ALRRRRIIIGHHTT. Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. On that cue, Midoriya springs forward. In the same moment, Dark Shadow rips free of his wielder's body. Duck. He avoids the first swing by bending his knees, and he uses that momentum to spring up again. His fingers reach, curl in, and grasp thick cloth. Midoriya pulls, but encounters no resistance. Instead he ends up stumbling backward, and just barely stops himself from falling on his ass. Staring at his hand in shock, he finds that while he has Tokoyami's cloak, there's no one attached to it. He slipped out. When? How? At least take him on a date before you rip his clothes off. Dark Shadow whoops. Midoriya's cheeks flush bright red, and he gawks at the creature. Dark Shadow takes advantage of his stupor and swipes a giant claw at him, cackling as he does so. Unable to dodge, Midoriya is forced to block with his arms. The force of the hit pushes him back a few inches. He peeks up only to see Dark Shadow winding up to strike again. Gritting his teeth, he digs his sneakers into the dirt. Dark Shadow attacks a second time, and then a third. On the third, however, Midoriya drops his weight and ducks under the swing. His palms hit the ground, and he uses them to immediately shove himself back up. He sprints forward from there, running at full tilt toward Tokoyami while one hand shoves into his utility pack. Seeing Midoriya go for his partner, Dark Shadow comes shooting back to Tokoyami. Before he reaches him, a small beam of light has the creature recoiling with a distressed 𝐒𝐻. Tokoyami lurches forward, grabbing Midoriya's wrist and yanking it so the light swings away from Dark Shadow. This action earns him an uppercut to his lower mandible from Midoriya's left fist. 𝐒𝐻. Don't let him recover. Midoriya once again places his center low, this time to get both his arms locked around Tokoyami's legs so he can yank them out from under him. The other boy goes down easily enough, landing hard on his back, but begins to thrash with surprising ferocity. He doesn't get the chance to adjust his grasp before Dark Shadow's upon him, talons wrapping around his middle and trying to yank him off. Tokoyami further punishes him by putting a hand in his face and shoving his head. Still, he stubbornly refuses to let go. Get the hell off, Dark Shadow demands, pulling with enough force Midoriya feared he might dislocate something. No, Tokoyami lets go of his face, but only so he can start hammering the crown of Midoriya's head with his fist. Oh, Midoriya grimaces. His thick hair only provided moderate cushioning from the blows. Suddenly the pressure around his stomach releases, and he sucks in a breath. Why? That breath knocks right back out of him as Dark Shadow re-emerges from Tokoyami, this time from his abdominals. Midoriya feels his arms strain and pop from trying to keep his grip even as he's uppercut by a huge, black fist. It's not enough to dislodge him, but it does give Tokoyami enough room to bring up a knee and ram it into his gut. I'm gonna throw up. Thankfully, he doesn't, but he is forced to release. As soon as he does, Dark Shadow's claw is slamming his chest and forcing him onto his back. He tries to get the flashlight lined up, but Tokoyami snatches it from his fingers and tosses it away. 𝐒𝐻. Midoriya groans, frustrated. Hold his legs first. Got it. Damn it. He remembered I'm using my legs now. Regardless, it doesn't stop Midoriya from throwing a punch at Tokoyami as he leans over him. It catches him in the shoulder. And though Tokoyami does wince, he isn't dissuaded. Dark Shadow has his lower half pinned, but his arms are, for the moment, unrestrained. This is just training. I can't use that here. If I screw up, I might not be able to use my arms anymore. He balls his fist and begins to aimlessly punch Dark Shadow's beak. Dark Shadow grins almost malevolently back at him, unaffected. That's not going to work, Tokoyami informs him as he begins to tie his ankles together. Not like I can do anything else. Midoriya returns. He does, however, stop punching. Instead, he rolls onto his side and uses his arm to lever himself, straining to break out of Dark Shadow's iron grasp. What little progress he manages to make is ruined as Tokoyami abruptly drops onto him. OOF. Tokoyami wasn't very heavy, but having an extra 100-something pounds slam into his chest is enough to make him buckle. First his legs were immobilized, now he's being used as a chair. Great, hold his arms now. Gotcha. Dark Shadow grabs him by the wrists and pins his arms over his head. That was so fast. It can't be over already, but I can't move. He wriggles in defiance, but Tokoyami just lowers his weight and puts more pressure on his chest. I think I win, he announces, eyes squinted with amusement. Midoriya fixes him with a glare. Yeah, well, he hesitates, too frustrated to think of anything clever. You got a bony butt. Tokoyami's beak falls open. Excuse me. His quirk erupts into laughter. I told you your ass was flat. Shut the hell up. Tokoyami barks, feathers puffing in indignation. Get off of me. Midoriya groans, fruitlessly kicking at his binds in humiliation. I don't think I will, you brat. The sounds Midoriya makes at this stage in his frustration become less human and more animal as he again wiggles in contumacious rage. Snarl all you like, beast. Tokoyami challenges, equally fuming. Tokoyami-kun. He jerks his head up, red eyes wide. Midoriya immediately stops struggling. Ida-kun, he says, hopeful. Sure enough, there he was in all his chrome glory, exhaust clouds billowing behind him, helmet glinting in the afternoon sun. Release Midoriya-kun immediately. Your sparring session is over, you villain. Get the fuck back here and fight 𝐒𝐻. Bakugo screams as he blasts his way across the field toward his opponent. Oh, that's not good. Midoriya whispers. Nope. Getting out of here. Let's bounce, Fumi. With a rustle and a gust of wind, the pressure on Midoriya's arms and chest is gone, and he's left prone, gazing skyward as Dark Shadow grabs his host and jets him away from the imminent blast zone. Wait, come get me. Midoriya cries as the explosions draw steadily nearer. Don't leave me down here. His pleas goes unanswered. Evening. Tokoyami greets coolly as he inches his door open just wide enough to peer around it. On the other side stands Ida, fist raised as if he had been preparing to knock again. Good evening. He returns, but only out of polite convention. His posture is rigid, and it's clear he means business. Is there something you'd like to discuss? Yes, I was recently informed by an anonymous source that you may be in possession of an item that violates school policy. To what kind of item are you referring to, President? A sword. Well, Tokoyami is careful to keep his voice even. I can assure you I have no such thing in my possession. Ada takes a step forward. As much as I want to trust your word, I can't simply dismiss the matter. I'd like to conduct a quick search of your room. I'm sure you would. Tokoyami-kun. He doesn't budge. President. Ada opens his mouth, closes it, and takes a moment to recompose himself. I promise I will respect your privacy and make my search as non-invasive as possible. You have my word. Tokoyami stares back at him, unblinking. Then, slowly, he opens the door and moves aside. Thank you. Ada steps into the gloomy room and adjusts his glasses. He pans over the area, searching. Arms crossed, Tokoyami keeps his gaze locked on his classmate. After a moment, Ada goes down to his knees and checks the underside of the bed. He discovers an assortment of socks, but not much else. That's my spot. Dark Shadow roars indignantly. Hush. Ada straightens back up and surveys the room again. His hands on his hips. It seems I was misinformed. He relaxes his arms, then bows his head. I apologize. Rather than answer, Tokoyami simply walks over to the door and holds it open wide. His classmate nods once more, then exits. 𝐴𝑠𝑢𝑘𝑢𝑦𝑜𝑚𝑖. Leave it on your balcony, please. Dark Shadow will retrieve it momentarily. Midoriya's eyebrows shoot up, and he frowns at the screen. This was really out of character for Tokoyami. Tokoyami's sleeping Detroit Smash, Dark Shadow. The answer to his question only serves to make him even more confused. Midoriya's brows furrow even deeper, and he types as fast as his thumbs can manage. Detroit Smash, so you're always active, even when he's not. Tokoyami eating Tokoyami getting dressed. Midoriya stares at the two new attachments, taking them in. After a long moment, he scrolls back up to the first picture Dark Shadow had sent and re-examines it. As dim as the photo was, he could still make out Tokoyami's slumbering form fairly well. Ordinarily, Tokoyami had a sharp countenance, both literally and figuratively, but this picture showed Midoriya a different side. It was hard to describe, but Tokoyami seemed softer somehow. In any regard, it was a glimpse at something rarely seen. Viewing it seemed almost like an intrusion, like he'd stumbled on something he wasn't meant to see. And perhaps, in a way, he was intruding. Tokoyami was asleep, and he surely had no idea what his mischievous quirk was up to. Despite this realization, Midoriya finds himself coming back to the image a third time. There's a few seconds of hesitation, his thumb hovering over the screen, before he presses down and selects the download option from the pop-up menu. Scrolling back to the bottom of the chat, he does the same with the other two pictures. Detroit Smash, Again his eyebrows shoot up. Well, that was unexpected. Detroit Smash, good night. Bidden to the shadow creature's command, Midoriya locks his phone and rolls onto his side to put it on the charger. Turning back over, he lays with his hands folded on his stomach, toes pointed at the ceiling. It was weird, like really weird. Even without the photo in front of his nose, his mind manages to conjure up the image of an unconscious Tokoyami. He could clearly envision the boy's illuminated face, eyes shut and beak open. In the dim glow from the lamp, his feathers looked especially soft. At the thought of touching them, Midoriya's fingers involuntarily twitch. With a jolt, his other hand comes around and squeezes those digits as if to punish them for thinking up something so scandalous. Touching somebody else's face while they sleep? Yeah, cause that's totally not creepy. It's as he's admonishing himself that he notices his quickened pulse. What is wrong with me? With a groan, he flips onto his stomach and shoves his hands under his pillow. Grab a handful. Move the elastic from his wrist to his fingers. Twist it around. Midoriya stares into the mirror, frowning. Stray pieces of hair stick out in odd places, and there's a weird bump near the high point of his skull. A few strands, which he swore he'd pulled back, fall onto his forehead. Ugh, he groans in frustration. 5th time's the charm. He pulls the tie out and shakes his hair loose. Grabbing his brush, he runs the stiff bristles through. Once he's certain there's no tangles, he tries again. Unfortunately, the result is much the same as the attempts previous. Midoriya slaps his hand against the sink and exhales hard through his nose. Damn it, he mutters under his breath. Having trouble. Eyebrows raised, Midoriya turns his head sharply to the source of the inquiry, his eyes alight on Tokoyami standing just inside the doorway, holding his sneakers in one hand. Yeah, he admits with a sigh, I need a haircut. It has gotten a bit long, Tokoyami muses as he steps into the room. A few feet from Midoriya, he bends down and places his shoes on the floor, then straightens up again, speaking more tentatively. He asks, would you like some assistance? At first, his instinct is to refuse. The idea of needing help to do something so simple as tying his hair embarrasses him. But after another glance in the mirror he reconsiders. I suck at this. Reluctantly, he takes his hair down and offers Tokoyami the band. Great, I'm gonna get shown up by a guy who doesn't even have hair. Tokoyami moves in closer, standing right behind him now. To Midoriya's surprise, however, he doesn't immediately start gathering hair. Instead, he reaches around and takes the brush. A moment later, Midoriya feels its bristles tug through his curls. Heat rises to his face, tinging it pink. His fingers find the edge of the sink and grip it. Am I doing this wrong? The other boy asks, voice tentative. Belatedly, Midoriya realizes Tokoyami can see his face in the mirror. No, it's just. He trails off before finally admitting, kind of embarrassing. Tokoyami blinks. How so? I mean, Midoriya falters, trying to think of how to explain. I shouldn't have to get help just to put my hair up, you know. For a long moment, Tokoyami goes quiet, the brush stilling in his hand. Then, do you think there's something wrong with having help? The question is asked evenly, with no hint of anger, yet Midoriya still flinches. His brow furrows in confusion. And then he remembers something Tokoyami had said back in their first semester, I am 2 in 1. The realization dawns on him. Tokoyami always had someone to help him, no matter how silly or menial the task was. He wasn't giving his assistance out of pity. It was because having an extra pair of hands was what he considered normal. Midoriya's ears turn red, and he internally admonishes himself. And no, he mumbles, ashamed. He'd been too busy nursing his pride to appreciate Tokoyami's kindness. Again, Tokoyami is quiet, and Midoriya worries he's upset him. A hand touches his crown, pushing lightly on it. Tilt your head, please, Tokoyami instructs. Cheeks still burning, Midoriya dips his chin toward his chest. The brush passes through his hair again, once, twice, several times. It snags a little in some places, but Tokoyami is careful not to yank too hard. He can't quite recall the last time someone else had brushed his hair for him. It was probably at least a few years ago. His mother had long since given up on trying to tame his wild, unruly locks, and so he was left to conquer them himself. After a minute, the brush is set aside, and Tokoyami's deft fingers replace it. They dive deep into his hair, combing over his scalp. Midoriya's shoulders slacken as his posture noticeably relaxes. I don't know what he's doing, but it feels nice. Midoriya peeks into the mirror, watching his friend's reflection. Tokoyami continues running his digits through dense hair, too absorbed in the task to realize he's being watched. He fusses with Midoriya's hair a minute more before he finally runs his palms over the dome of Midoriya's skull and begins collecting hair in his fists. Once he's sure he has all of it, he'll pull it tight and twist the elastic around. Is that fine? Tokoyami asks, peering over Midoriya's shoulder to get a look at the front. Touching his fingers to his scalp, Midoriya turns his head to the left, then to the right. It looks good. He faces Tokoyami with a grateful smile. Thanks. Before Tokoyami can respond, a voice interjects, rockin' the ponytail, Midoriya. Midoriya twists in place and identifies the speaker as Kaminari. He rubs his neck, uncertain if the compliment was genuine or not. Thanks. Who you trying to impress? Hey, you never do anything with your hair, Kaminari says, so there's gotta be a reason, right? There's a certain coyness to his expression, and he cocks his head slightly. You got a hot date you didn't tell me about. And no. Midoriya shakes his head in a way that's far too vigorous for his companion's liking. Don't do that. Tokoyami chides under his breath. It'll fall out. Sorry, he whispers back. More composed, he says to Kaminari. It's not like that, my hair's just getting long. I need to keep it out of my face for dance practice. Oh, there's a clear look of disappointment in his eyes. That's way less exciting. Midoriya can only offer him a small shrug and a wry smile as consolation. Wahhhh. Hagakure yells out the moment she spots Midoriya walking up. You did your hair. To his great embarrassment, the other girl's attention is immediately drawn to him. Without even a chance to compose himself, he's swarmed by Asui, Ashido, Uraraka, and Hagakure. You look so cruty. This is really different for you, Midoriya-chan. I want to touch it. You'd look so good with my hair clips. You have to let me put them in. He says, already raising his palms to defend himself, maybe after practice. The girls spend a few more minutes crooning over him, just until he's on the verge of death by embarrassment, before they carry on their merry way. As soon as they're gone, he sighs in relief only to be accosted a second time. It's not fair here, Midoriya whines, pawing at his own head. I can't do anything like that. Midoriya regards him with a small frown. It's not really that different. Are you kidding me? He cries, indignant. You had the girls fawning all over you. His fingers ball into fists, and Midoriya can see him visibly trembling with envy. And what did you do? Brush them off. It's just hair, Midoriya mutters. With Yaoyorozu-san's creation, we don't really have any limits on what we can do for outfits, but that makes it hard to narrow it down, Midoriya says thoughtfully. Uraraka nods in agreement and pops the top of her canned juice. There's a soft SSSD as air rushes into the container. There's so many options, and I'm not even sure what the theme is supposed to be. I think it's a disco. 𝐎𝐻𝐢𝐫 the disco ball, anyway. Isn't the band playing rock music, though? 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 asks, brows furrowing. Midoriya squints, trying to recall what the genre was. I think 𝐒𝐻𝐢𝐽 said it was rock, but in the style of new rave. Exasperated, 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 throws her hands up. Because of this action, the contents of her juice can go flying through the opening and splatter on her shorts. 𝐎𝐻𝐢𝐽. Hastily, she sets down her beverage and begins swiping at the wet spots. I don't get it, she continues in a mutter. Is it rock or is it rave? Do you want me to get some napkins? Midoriya asks, concerned. She shakes her head. It's fine. I have to wash these tonight, anyway. Upon seeing Midoriya's doubtful frown, she adds, don't worry about it. With reluctance, Midoriya lets the matter drop. I guess the theme then is just club, but I'm not really sure what that means exactly. He begins fidgeting with his fingers, mulling it over. It doesn't really help us narrow down the costumes. Maybe we should just go with whatever's fashionable? It's at the exact moment 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 says this that she remembers who she's talking to. Her gaze pans over Midoriya's outfit, a t-shirt with a cartoon drawing of a piece of taiyaki, a pair of bright orange basketball shorts, and his red high tops. She lingers just a bit too long, and Midoriya takes notice, blushing self-consciously. He crosses his arms and turns away from her. I'm not saying you're not. 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 fumbles, aware that she's offended her friend. You look fine. He ignores her consolation and continues silently nursing his pride. You're handsome, she says, clasping his shoulder. You're just saying that. No, it's true. Midoriya is jostled as she insistently shakes him. He doesn't appear to quite believe her, but he does put his arms down. His frown softens, and he faces 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 again. She gives his bicep an apologetic punch. Oh, that didn't hurt, 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 chides. And we still need to come up with something. Ashido-san wants ideas from everybody. Well, Midoriya begins. If we're talking about what's fashionable, we could probably get some inspiration from Whisker's blog. Who? Whiskers, the hero of hair. I don't think I remember who that is, 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 says with a frown, trying to conjure up an image in her mind of the hero mentioned. After a moment she shakes her head, unsuccessful. Really? Midoriya asks, surprised. They were ranked number 33 in Japan for a while, but they moved back to the UK about 4 years ago. They also were ranked number 4 in the Japan's most fashionable hero poll in the Hero Highlights magazine. Again, she shakes her head. I never really followed that kind of stuff much. Their picture is still on the 𝐭𝐈𝐫 brand shampoo bottles. 𝐭𝐈𝐫 brand. Sounds expensive. Midoriya doesn't register her comment. Instead, he lets out a sudden, oh, and his hand goes diving into his pocket. I read an article saying that Whiskers is going to be in Japan in a couple of weeks. I think I saved a picture from it. Once the device unlocked, he'll go to his photo gallery and open his recent saves folder. As soon as it's open, however, his eyes widen, and he quickly swipes past the first 3 images. Unfortunately, he wasn't quite fast enough. 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 leans in with interest. What was that? A blush creeps onto his cheeks, and he stammers, and nothing. His thumb continues to frantically swipe, searching in vain for the picture he'd meant for her to see. 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫's interest spikes even higher. She grabs his arm. Show me. I'm looking for it. Not that, she says incredulously. The other thing. I don't know what you mean. She snatches at his phone with her other hand, but he manages to jerk it out of her reach. Now she's riled up. Deku-kun. It's nothing, Midoriya insists, holding his phone away from her. Hopping up from her seat, she looms over him while making another grab for it. Midoriya pulls his phone to his chest and guards it there. Undeterred, 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 grunts, show me, and begins prying at his fingers. He doubles over, protecting the device with his entire body. This maneuver earns his ribs a harsh jab from 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫's middle and index fingers. Let me see. Oh. She jabs him again and gets a similar response. Her fingers poised to strike again before he finally gives in with a defeated, fine. Just stop poking me. Victorious, 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 snatches up her prize and huddles over it like a greedy goblin about to tear into fresh garbage. Eyebrows furrowed and lips set into a thin line, she swipes her way back to the beginning of the gallery. Midoriya rubs his side. Humiliated, 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 stares at the screen, holding it close to her face. Several seconds pass. Then, without looking up, Deku-kun. He swallows past the lump in his throat. Yeah, are you dating Tokoyami-kun? His entire face goes scarlet as he cries. Huh. The volume of his outburst attracts the attention of a few bystanders, so he hushes down to an emphatic whisper. No, we're not. I didn't take any of those. She squints at him, unconvinced. But you have them. 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐫 points out. That doesn't mean he's. Midoriya can't even manage to utter the word. Your boyfriend. Hearing her speak what he could not is the final blow. He buries his face in his hands, mortified. Can we please talk about this later? Oh, we will. Her ominous promise doesn't reassure him by any means. But at least she seems willing to lay off for now. She presses his phone to the back of his hand, and he takes it with a disingenuous, thanks. That's a wrap. 𝐒𝐻𝐢𝐫 announces. From her left side there's a noisy clang as Bakugo throws down his drumsticks. They bounce off his drum set and clatter to the floor. Fucking finally. What crass language. 𝐎𝐻𝐢𝐫 gasps, affronted by his vocabulary. Ignoring him, 𝗔𝗂 continues. Everybody pack up and go home, we'll pick back up tomorrow. Tokoyami waits until she's begun gathering her notes to approach her. When he does, it's in a very tentative manner. 𝗔𝗂𝗵𝗲. She glances up and seems mildly surprised. I apologize for not bringing this to your attention earlier. He dips his head to her. But I won't be able to attend practice this weekend. I will be out of town. Oh, her eyebrows raise, but she doesn't appear upset. That's okay, I'll catch you up when you get back. Where are you going? Home. Oh, sweet. 𝗔𝗂 smiles, then lightly bumps his shoulder. Don't get in any trouble. He blinks, uncomprehending. I won't. Her smile dissolves into a soft frown. Yeah, right. Having finished compiling her papers, she nods a goodbye to Tokoyami. See you when you get back. After the other band members have left, Tokoyami lingers behind, taking his time and putting away his music and his instrument. He shoulders his messenger bag and turns out the light as he exits. To his surprise, Uraraka is standing outside, her back to the wall. Pausing only briefly to acknowledge her with a nod, he starts to pad down the hallway. Tokoyami-kun. He stops and turns, confused. Was she waiting for me? Uraraka catches up and comes to his side. Are you going back to the dorms? That was my intention. Yes, he answers cautiously. Can I walk with you? He blinks at her in surprise, then dips his beak. Of course, perhaps she simply didn't want to walk by herself. But if that were the case, why had she not gone with Ieyasu and 𝗔𝗂? And why had she been outside the band room in the first place? These questions occupy Tokoyami's mind as the pair begin to walk. Something's up. Tokoyami watches the girl from his peripheral, but he's unable to discern anything from her expression. As far as he could tell, she didn't seem particularly nervous or upset. They come to the door, and he reaches for the handle, prepared to open and hold it for the lady. Her hand touches his arm, giving him pause. He looks to her face, a silent question in his eyes. Actually, can we stay in here and talk? Tokoyami's shoulders tense. He leans in and asks in a low, serious voice, is everything all right? Friendly as she was, he and Uraraka rarely spoke. For her to specifically seek him out and ask to speak privately was no small thing. Her eyebrows go up, but then she waves her hand dismissively. Oh, no. Everything's fine. She gives Tokoyami an apologetic smile, then continues, I just had something I wanted to ask you about. This does nothing to ease his tension. He can't fathom what Uraraka could possibly want his input on. He sees her expression change, and she seems to visibly lose some of her confidence. Aren't Deku-kun good friends? Of all things she may have inquired about, this question was the least expected. He's completely thrown off by it. His eyes widen a few degrees, and he blinks slowly. She meets his bewildered gaze, expectant for his answer. A question about Midoriya. From his observations of her, Uraraka had seemed to have a special interest in the boy. And while lately she seemed much calmer in his presence, it was definitely possible that she still had feelings for him. Realizing this, Tokoyami feels his heart sink. Foiled by the fairer sex. I would. He chooses his next words carefully. Consider him a friend of mine? Yes. So you're close. Her inquiry genuinely challenges him. Midoriya had always been open and friendly with him, but he was that way with everyone. Tokoyami wished to be able to claim a closeness Midoriya, to know him more intimately, but he didn't consider that wish the current reality. They were friends, companions, classmates, certainly, but close didn't describe their relationship. Not especially, he admits. After a brief pause, he goes on to say, I'm afraid I'm not the right person to approach about this. Midoriya liked her. He knew that. It had been obvious enough from the beginning. Tokoyami had witnessed many of Midoriya's panicked, flustered episodes triggered by Uraraka's proximity. And who could blame him? Uraraka was a beautiful young maiden whose charm and good nature had garnered her many admirers. No foul word or curse ever befell her lips, and her rosy cheeks seemed permanently dented by her frequent smiles. While Tokoyami held no romantic interest in her, doubted himself even capable of harboring such feelings for a woman, he could understand how Midoriya's attraction had arose. Uraraka's brows furrow, and there's an uncomprehending look about her. Approach about what? Now it's his turn to be confused. Your attraction to Midoriya. Her eyes pop open wide, and she cries out incredulously, my what? Hot blush floods her face, turning her rosy cheeks even rosier. I'm sorry, was this not about? No. A mix of embarrassment and mortification dances on Uraraka's features. I'm not in love with Deku-kun. Immediately after that statement, her indignation falters. At least, not anymore. Not anymore. Tokoyami presses. She shakes her head. I mean, I thought I was, but I got over it and this isn't about me. Uraraka's hands fly up into her hair, and she scratches her head furiously. This is supposed to be about you. I'm not sure I follow. Tokoyami responds, cocking his head to the side. I thought we were talking about Midoriya. When did the subject change? It is about him. You just said it's about you and him. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 declares impatiently. You've been talking to each other a lot lately, right? And spending a lot of time together. Tokoyami stiffens, and he feels a sort of tension in his gut, like his intestines were a rope that had been suddenly pulled taut. What are you getting at? He asks in a low voice, struggling to keep down a rising sense of panic. Do you? She leans in a bit closer, speaking more softly, like Deku-kun. He leans away from her gentle, earnest face, away from her pink lips spilling interrogations, away from her wide, searching eyes. His heart pounds in his chest, knocking so hard against his ribs he's convinced there's no way she couldn't hear it. What do you expect me to say? Silence. She waits for his answer. He doesn't give it. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 stares at him a bit longer, then smiles softly. Her hand clasps his shoulder, and she nods once. I understand. That touch lingers for a moment longer, then slips away as her fingers fall back down to her side. She inclines her head to the door, then reaches for the handle. Let's walk back together, okay? It's getting late. His eyes avert hers, and he stares at the floor for a long moment. Then, somewhat reluctantly, he nods. The handle plunges down, allowing the cold, evening air to sweep into the hall. Tokoyami hunkers lower into his sweatshirt and follows 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 outside. Relax. I'm trying. Try counting again. It's not going to work. Tokoyami heaves a sigh, rolling over in bed. Back at UA, the rooms were small and the walls thin. He could often hear snippets of murmured conversation, footsteps in the room above, or his neighbor's gentle snoring. Here, however, there was just silence. His foster parents' bedroom was downstairs, on the opposite wing of the building. With no occupants beside or below him, the quiet of the twilight hours was unignorable. He'd only been living at the dorm since mid-August. Not even 2 months, and yet his bed there felt more familiar to him than the one he lay in now. Despite his best efforts to dismiss it, a sense of displacement plagued him, a gripping insistence that he was somewhere he shouldn't be, an intruder in his own home. At any moment the true proprietor of this space would return and, to their great alarm, find him nestled in their sheets. I want to go home. We are home. Before he can form a rebuttal to Dark Shadow's lack of conviction, a creaking on the stairs has him startling to attention. Tokoyami listens closely to the footsteps that pad along the wooden floorboards. Michiko's gate. Approaching. A hand on the doorknob. He holds his breath. Turning. Opening. 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝐽. He considers pretending to be asleep, but decides against it. She would have woke him anyway. Yes, I'll be out running errands tomorrow, so I won't be home until dinner, and Rio has an early meeting. I left you some money on the table if you want to go out. Okay. There's a small lapse of silence, as if she's waiting. He doesn't know what for. Then, finally, all right, well, good night. Good night, he repeats. After the door clicks shut, Tokoyami listens for the sound of his foster mother's feet on the stairs again. They groan under her as she descends, and then the nightscape dissolves back into silence. Why did they want you to come home if they're not going to be here, anyway? Sinking. Pebbles in his chest, gathering earth, turning to stones in his stomach. Sinking. I don't know. Pulling him down. I'm here. First a pair of arms, then a head. A black life jacket, molding around his torso. He hugs it close to himself. I'm here, his shadow repeats. I know. The sound of his own speech is jarring. 2 hoarse, whispered words that shatter a world of quiet. Just as abruptly, however, the quiet reforms and swallows up what lingered of his voice. Talk to me. His throat is closed up. I don't. No, I can't. Talk to someone else, then. Who else? Without moving from his position against his companion's chest, Dark Shadow stretches an arm to the bedside table. He retracts it and then deposits Tokoyami's phone into his hand. I don't want to bother him. This isn't his problem. Don't make it a problem. You're just talking. Nothing else. Tokoyami exhales through his nostrils. The startling volume of it only serves to remind him how oppressive the silence is. Apprehensively, he opens the Hero Chat application and checks his friends list. A lime green check mark stares back at him from beside Midoriya's screen name. His thumbs hover over the keyboard, resting somewhere on the edge of deleting and expounding. He'd managed to say both too much and too little. The question, though completely innocuous, has his gut twisting. He isn't sure how to answer. A bead of sweat rolls between his shoulder blades. His gut twists again, almost painfully. He draws a deep inhale. Instinctively, he wants to lie, insist it's nothing of consequence and move on from it. Tokoyami wonders, however, how transparent that lie would be to Midoriya. This time it's his heart that squeezes uncomfortably. His breath catches in his throat and then releases with a hitch. There was nothing more he wanted than to hear Midoriya's sweet, emphatic voice, but it seemed too much to ask. He stares hard at the screen. His grip on the device tightens, and he struggles against the tightness in his chest. A few short moments later, too quick for him to compose himself, his phone vibrates in his hand. He thumbs the accept button but doesn't speak just yet. Hey, he croaks back. There's some strange, muffled crackling from the other end, and Tokoyami worries that the call's being dropped. Sorry, Midoriya's voice returns. I had to move something. How are you? Silence. He exhales. Not great. Oh, right. I knew that. Sorry. Tokoyami doesn't respond. What did you want to talk about? Tokoyami-kun. His words come out in a hoarse whisper. I shouldn't have bothered you. I'm sorry. Midoriya goes quiet for a long moment. When he finally speaks, it's in the softest tone Tokoyami had ever heard from him. Please tell me what's wrong, Tokoyami-kun. He swears he can feel his heart breaking. Feel as the hairline cracks climb their way up to his aorta. Tears sting his eyes, and he strains to keep them from spilling. I can't. I just don't want. His voice cracks, pitching up, to be here. What's your address? What? He asks, startled. What's your address? Midoriya repeats, I'll come get you. It can't be. The tears fall, but he manages to speak clearly. I'm in Shizuoka, Midoriya. 2 hours away. There's a series of warped, unintelligible noises from Midoriya's side of the call. Midoriya, hang on, I'm gonna put you on speaker. Another muffled sound. This time Midoriya's voice sounds farther away. Okay, go ahead. I said I'm in Shizuoka. It's a 2-hour train ride. No response. Midoriya, I'm listening. It's 2 hours. I know. What are you doing? Putting on my shoes. Tokoyami sits up in his bed with a jolt, eyes widening. Oh my god, he's serious. He struggles with his words. You can't. The train stops running at 1, right? Yes, that's why you can't. His legs swing over the edge of the mattress. You'd get stuck here until morning. How late do the buses run in Shizuoka? Midoriya, if I leave now I can still probably catch the last train out. He's not listening at all. Tokoyami's on his feet now, pacing the room. Midoriya, this is a fool's errand. You can't go through with this. I need to use my phone to double-check the departure schedule. I'll call you back when I'm on the train. Midoriya. A small beep informs him that the call has ended. He stares at the screen, watching it shake as the hand that holds it trembles. Phone charger. Check. Wallet. Check. Change of clothes. Check. Coat. Check. Well, actually it was a jean jacket layered over his hoodie, but it was close enough. What else? His eyes travel to his bed, more specifically to the worn, baby blue rabbit which sat in the corner by his pillow. He stares at her for a long moment, then shakes his head. I'm too old to bring her on the train with me. He tucks the bunny into his backpack, nestling her in between his clothes. It's not curfew yet, and it's Friday. There'll definitely be people in the lobby. I can't go out that way. Midoriya's finger taps his chin while he struggles to come up with a way to sneak out without anyone noticing. He stares at the floor, down at his elongated shadow. With his back to the balcony window, he toes across the room and unlatches the lock. Then he pauses, hesitating, before finally pushing the glass door open. The cold October air rushes in to greet him. He steps outside, closing the door behind him. His room was on the 2nd floor, so it thankfully wasn't that far of a drop to the ground. In his training, he'd scaled much longer distances. Still, his bulky backpack might hinder the descent. I don't think I have anything that would break. After a moment, he removes the pack and drops it over the railing. It hits the ground with only a soft thump. Sorry, Uzagi-chan. Just as he's lifting his leg to climb over, he hears from his left side the sound of plastic rollers against metal tracks, followed by a stream of quiet music floating out into the night. Føler dsøy, flatten sur vos épaules, vous avez le beau rôle, honoré dit le roi. Slowly, Midoriya turns his head. Bonsoir, crap. Hello, Aoyama-kun. The boy in question is staring at him from the adjacent balcony, and even though his arms are spread out wide, Midoriya can see him shivering in his thin, silk pajamas. It's kinda chilly, yeah. Midoriya continues, struggling to keep the panic out of his voice. You should probably go back in before you catch a cold. I think you should fetch your bag, monsieur. Why yeah, I'm gonna get it. Aoyama walks on tiptoe to the guardrail, then bends to drape himself over it, resting his chin on his forearms. Going somewhere, mayhaps ... to a rendezvous romantique. Romantique. Don't think too hard about that. It was a good enough excuse, and it had been handed right to him. It didn't matter as long as he could get Aoyama to keep quiet about him sneaking off campus. Midoriya nods, thankful that Aoyama couldn't see the sweat on his brow. Why yes, I am. Can you promise not to tell? But of course, Mon-ami. He perks up, hands going over his heart. My lips are sealed. I won't breathe a word about you going to see Tonshare. With Aoyama's reassurance, he's able to relax a bit. Thanks, he says earnestly. I really appreciate it. He grips the top of the railing and hooks his leg over it. I'll see you later, okay? Don't stay out here too long. Au revoir. After giving his friend one final wave, Midoriya returns to the matter at hand, getting down. Unfortunately, there didn't appear to be any footholds for him to use. It was just flat concrete to either side of the balcony. Guess I'll have to jump. He inhales sharply, preparing for the drop, and then springs forward. Like he'd practiced before, he rolls upon hitting the ground, sparing his legs the impact. When he's up again, he wipes his hands on his sweatpants and moves to retrieve his backpack. His next obstacle, actually leaving campus, proved a more significant challenge. The main gate was set on a timer and would only allow students to leave beginning at 7 a.m. Until that time, only those with a staff ID could enter or exit the grounds. If he wanted to leave, he'd have to find a way over the wall that surrounded UA, preferably without triggering any alarms. They've definitely upped security after the attack at USJ last semester. There's probably sensors set to go off if someone attempts to scale the wall. If I trigger one of them, the entire school will go into a panic. Ugh, he groans, furiously messing his hair with both hands. Think. How can I get over? He knows the solution, and it was a rather simple one. Unfortunately, it was out of the question. I can't ask her to help me sneak out. I won't risk getting her in trouble like that. Midoriya shakes his head, trying to banish the idea from his mind to make room for a different plan. But he only draws a blank. Damn it. While he's straining for a solution, his phone begins to buzz. He fumbles for it, then brings it up to his ear, expecting Tokoyami's baritone. His blood runs cold when instead a quiet soprano asks, "Deku-kun, why are you outside?" "𝐒𝐻𝐻, what do you mean?" A second voice, slightly deeper than the first, answers, "We can see your backpack, Midoriya-chan." Turning, slowly, facing the soft glow of the dorms, looking back at the enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows that covered the west side of Heights Alliance's ground level, peering in at the two figures who were peering out at him. One of them raises their hand, painstakingly, as if pulled by a string. He raises his and waves back. "You should come back in," Asuhi suggests in a tone that doesn't at all sound like a suggestion. "I can't," Midoriya protests. I have something I need to do." Immediately, Uriaraka is on the alert. "Is everything okay? Did something happen? We should get Aizawa-sensei know." The word comes out a bit too forceful, and he reels it back. "Everything's fine, Uriaraka-san. It's just, I have someone who needs me right now." "Are they in trouble?" No, he reassures. "It's nothing like that. I can't really explain it, but I know he needs me." For a moment, the line goes quiet. Midoriya squints at the two figures, but they don't seem to move. Then, suddenly, "Well, I'm gonna help, too." His eyebrows shoot up. More quietly, farther away from the receiver, "Ochako-chan. If Deku-kun says someone needs help, it must be serious, so I'm gonna help." At that, he begins to panic. That's okay. You don't have to." He watches in growing horror as Uriaraka storms away from the window and out of his line of sight. "Uriaraka-san, stay right there," she commands, deadly serious. "I'm getting my coat." With an imperative like that, he can't argue. "Oh, okay." He hears a beep, then silence. And so he's left to wait, standing on the frosted lawn, the cold biting his tender cheeks. His fists shove into his pockets, and he regrets rushing out without his gloves. Gloves, however, wouldn't necessarily ward off the ache in his fingers. As soon as the weather started to turn cooler, he'd noticed his hands cramping up more often. With the frequent autumn storms, the ache was almost constant. "It's because I messed up my hands so much." He removes one fist from his pocket and uncurls it, turning it palm side down to examine his own crooked digits. More and more he was realizing just how much damage had been done. He couldn't gauge pressure accurately, and often ended up applying too much or too little. His pencils would drop. He'd readjust. It'd snap. Nothing felt quite the same as it used to. His blankets weren't as soft. His teacup not as hot. His own skin felt like something he couldn't place. Not quite smooth. Not quite rough. Just unfamiliar. Why am I thinking about this? It's not important right now. His hand slips back into his pocket, and he returns his attention to where the girls had been standing. Both Uriaraka and Asuhi had gone away from the window, presumably to go get their coats. As far as he could tell, there was no one else in the lobby. What should I say? Despite Uriaraka's unconditional desire to help, he knew she'd have more questions. He could assume Asuhi was also coming with her, which meant he'd have to answer to her as well. Midoriya blinks, conflicted. Maybe they wouldn't understand or agree with his decision, but that wasn't a legitimate cause to hide the reason behind it. So why do I want to? What am I afraid of? As hard as he ponders the question, the answer never surfaces. He's eventually roused from his thoughts by Uriaraka's voice calling out, "Deku-kun." He turns and spots both her and Asuhi approaching from around the southwest corner of their dorm building. Asui's gait is sluggish, and it appears as if Uriaraka's grasp on her is the only thing keeping her upright. As the pair draws nearer, Midoriya can make out a slight frown and droopy eyes. "Is it okay for you to be out here, Tsuyu-chan?" He regards her slumped posture with concern. She nods, but he can't tell if it's her answering him or fighting off her own drowsiness. Uriaraka releases her hand and instead brings an arm around her shoulders. "Don't hibernate just yet. We'll go back in soon, I promise." Grateful to leech off her companion's body heat, Asuhi leans in close. "What are you breaking the rules for this time?" Midoriya-chan. Despite her lethargic state, she manages to deliver a scathing interrogative. 𝗬𝗧𝗏. Her question has Midoriya floundering. I'm not trying to break the rules. You're sneaking out. That's breaking the rules, she bluntly replies. His already pink face waxes even pinker, and he looks away. I just see there's this thing, and, I think it's kind of important. You can tell us, Deku-kun. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 interjects. He takes a moment to recompose himself. I got a call from Tokoyami-kun. Actually I called him and, I think he needs somebody right now. Tokoyami-kun. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 echoes. Is he okay? Midoriya raises his hands as if to pacify her concern. He's okay. He's not in danger. Or, at least I don't think so. He frowns, eyebrows knitting, sounded really upset. I want to check on him. For a long moment, the girls are quiet. They turn their faces to each other, 𝗬𝗏𝗏 up at 𝗧𝗏𝗏 and 𝗧𝗏𝗏 down at her, to share a look that Midoriya can't read. He fidgets nervously, waiting for one of them to respond. It's 𝗬𝗏𝗏 who finally speaks. You should have said you were doing it for Tokoyami-chan from the beginning. Confused, he opens his mouth to reply, but she cuts him off. I don't want to help you break the rules, but I won't tell anyone. Though he's still puzzled, he dips his head to her. Thank you. It means a lot. All right, 𝗧𝗏𝗏 exclaims, pleased by 𝗬𝗏𝗏's compliance. What's the plan? Well, Midoriya begins. I just need to get over the wall. It's about 10 meters tall, but I'm sure there's invisible sensors even higher up than that. I'd need an additional 5 meters of clearance just to be safe. With her quirk, it should be easy. She nods, but then her eager smile dissolves into a frown. But once you're up there, how will you get down? I'll have to stick the landing when you release. That's a 4-story fall, Midoriya-chan. His brows furrow, and he scratches his chin. Hang on, he says while getting out his phone. So if average acceleration is 9.8 meters per second, and I fall from 15 meters, Deku-kun, and I weigh about 64 kilograms, Midoriya-chan. Not hearing either of them, he continues punching numbers into his device's calculator. He frowns at the screen, erases, and then recalculates. I'll hit the ground at almost 62 kilometers per hour. The girl's eyes widen. That's like getting hit by a car. Yeah, he rubs his neck. I can't just let you fall like that. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 protests. You'd break your everything. Hasn't stopped him before. 𝗬𝗏𝗏 mutters. That was true enough, but still hurtful. Midoriya turns away from her, avoiding eye contact. I can't get to Tokoyami-kun if I'm all banged up. After a few more seconds of mulling it over, he says, I'll use my quirk to propel myself to the ground while I'm still weightless. If I fire off behind my back, the momentum will push me toward the ground. Will that work? He nods. I'll be fine. Just be ready to release when I tell you. But can you do it without breaking your fingers again? Midoriya glances at 𝗬𝗏𝗏, then down at his hand. I think I can control it. I have to control it. If I break them one more time. His fingers curl into a determined fist. I can definitely do this. I just need you to make me float, 𝗧𝗏𝗏-san. She seems to hesitate for a moment, but quickly schools her expression into the same look of determination as her friend. Right, let's do this. With the girls following just behind him, Midoriya approaches the wall. He stops a few yards from it, gazing up. Ready when you are, 𝗧𝗏𝗏 announces. A few more seconds, an intake of cold air, and he slowly extends his hand to her. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 takes it, fingers curling around his, and squeezes. His feet begin to lift, and his stomach flutters as he becomes weightless. Midoriya squeezes her hand back, and then she lets him go. With no anchor to hold him, Midoriya begins to lift higher and higher into the sky. He watches his friends on the ground shrink, and the sight makes his guts twist. His arms flap in a vain attempt to keep himself upright. But he's inevitably forced into a more buoyant position as he rises through the air. 3 meters, 7 meters, 10. The view of the other side becomes visible. 12. Imagine the egg in the microwave. He moves his hand behind his back, index finger ready to fire. 15. Pain, not agonizing, but it did hurt. But it's not broken. The blast sends him about 5 meters down. Immediately, however, he begins to float back up. Again, quickly, just to be careful, he fires from his middle finger this time. Once again there's that pinching sensation, but nothing snaps. One more time. His ring finger. Pain. His nose brushes dewy grass. Release. He hollers, praying his voice carries through the concrete wall. A second later he's on the ground, palms and knees digging into cold earth. He squeezes his eyes shut, fighting back nausea while he waits for everything to stop spinning. Eventually he does recover and manages to stand on wobbly legs. Cool, at least I made it. The bus driver gives Midoriya a scrutinizing look as he swipes his pass. Bit late for you to be going out. He fishes for a believable excuse. Actually on my way home. It was partially true. He was going to a home. Just not his home. Thankfully, the driver seems to lose interest and shrugs. Whatever, just take a seat. Midoriya hurries to a spot nearer the middle of the vehicle. At this time of night it was too late for most people to be only now leaving work and too early for partygoers to leave the bars. As he glances around, he realizes there's only 2 other passengers. One is an alligator-skinned man wearing headphones in the very back, and the other is a rugged-looking woman across from him. She's slumped forward in her seat, possibly asleep. Though he can't discern from where it originates, Midoriya swears he can smell cigarettes. He spends a few seconds more simply looking around the interior of the bus before he decides to check his messages, even in spite of the apprehension this action brings him. He's expecting a long, angry paragraph from Tokoyami, or perhaps even a voice message, but discovers no such thing. Instead, there's only a hero chat notification from Aoyama, surprisingly. I still don't know what 𝗏𝗏 means. He'd have to remember to look it up later. For now, he digs in his pockets for his earbuds, but comes up empty-handed. Maybe in my bag. His hand dives into the front zip pocket. A moment later, he produces what he's looking for and plugs it into his phone's jack. He listens closely to the intro, anticipating the vocals. Toi mon amour. Mon ami quan ji revesse de toi mon amour. Mon ami quan ji chance pour toi. Mon amour. Mon ami ji ni pu vivre sans toi mon amour. Mon ami et je ne sais pas pourquoi mon amour. That means my love, right? And then mon ami. I think Aoyama-kun called me that earlier. Gni pas konu 𝐎𝗪𝙢𝗧𝗏 toi 𝐒𝐻𝐸𝐴I konu gni mn souviens pas à quoi bon chercher faire des comparisons 𝐒𝐸𝐸 unclear quand il racine et puisqu'il pris ton nom. As the song continues, he feels his stomach stir. It was beautiful, confusing, but beautiful, romantic. He did assume I was going on a date. His curiosity starts to get the better of him, and he pauses the music to pull up a translation of the lyrics. You, my love, my friend. When I dream, it's you I dream about. My love, my friend. When I sing to you. My love, my friend. I can't live without you. My love, my friend, and I don't know why. I've never met a boy like you before, and if I did, I don't remember. What good does it do to try to make comparisons? I've got a heart that knows when it is right, and that's why it has taken your name. Does he think I'm in love with? He shakes his head vigorously, cheeks flushing. What am I saying? He doesn't know I'm going to see Tokoyami-kun. It's not supposed to be about him. It's not like that. His gut twists uncomfortably, and his palms begin to sweat. We're friends. Maybe if it were different. Maybe if he were. Did it matter that he wasn't? Would he have to be a girl for me to be in love with him? To that question he doesn't have an answer. He only has the butterflies in his stomach, threatening to swarm his breast and eat his aching heart piece by piece. 10:56 p.m. Hey. Midoriya's soft, tentative voice says on the end of the receiver. Tokoyami waits, not speaking. Hold, so I'm on the train. I'll probably get in about 12:45. Can you give me your address? Inhale. You need to get off at the next station. What? Midoriya sounds alarmed. Why? I thought you were in Shizuoka. I want you to turn around and go home. Silence. Then, I don't want you to have to be alone all night. Exhale. His voice is kept quiet as he speaks. You've already done enough for me. Please return to your dorm. When Midoriya answers, Tokoyami can hear the sheepish smile in his voice. You know I'm not gonna do that, right? Sharper, more sternly. I'm serious. Another lapse of silence. Tokoyami waits, sitting with tension in his gut. I don't think I could get back in if I wanted to, Midoriya finally argues. It was hard enough to get out in the first place. Were you sane? Midoriya. It's okay. Midoriya insists. They helped me. Your Araka-san did. Tsuyu-chan promised not to say anything. He can feel his anger rising, bubbling, threatening to come to the surface. In a vain attempt to contain it, he lowers his voice even further. Unfortunately, the result is something akin to a hiss. Why did you enlist our classmates for this insane plot of yours? Midoriya turns defensive. I didn't mean to. Okay, you were caught. They won't tell anyone. Burning, crawling up his throat. That's not the point. His hands tremble, and he reaches out to grip the headrest of the chair he's standing next to. I didn't ask you to do this. I told you not to come, and you ignored me. Voice raised. Midoriya shoots back. I didn't ignore you. Then where are you now? I'm on the train. Precisely. Tokoyami retorts, growing louder. You ignored what I said, and now you can't go back. We'll figure it out when I get there. He bristles, nails digging into the upholstery. We'll have to, because you didn't give me a choice. I quote him sorry, okay. Midoriya's voice cracks, and Tokoyami can hear his breathing pick up. More quietly, he repeats, I'm sorry. Tears prick the corners of his eyes. The trembling has spread to the rest of his body, burning through his veins. There's coals in his stomach, and he's afraid to open his mouth, lest the intake of oxygen stoke his insides to flame. He rips the phone away from his ear and mashes the end call button before dropping the device on his desk and backing away from it. It buzzes against the wood. He doesn't answer. 11:22 p.m. Why be angry? Because it's foolish of him to come here. It's because he cares. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝐺. Tokoyami jams his foot into his boot and pulls his leg up to begin tying the laces. He's only causing problems, both for us and himself. You can't pretend you don't want him here. It doesn't matter what I want. He's taking an unnecessary risk for something that doesn't require his intervention. It's inane. This is why we never had any friends. He stops, hands freezing. What the hell are you talking about? Dark shadow flares under his skin, making it feel as if it were crawling with ants. Tokoyami just barely resists the urge to scratch himself. You always pushed everyone away. You never let anyone in. No, he argues, again feeling that familiar heaviness, the familiar burn. He shakes his head. We scared them. The other children were terrified. You were scared of them. His breath draws in, sharp and ragged, unable to resist the compulsion any longer. His nails bite into his skin. Stop. Why can't he come here? Why won't you let him help you? Because he can't help us. Tokoyami retorts aloud. The sound is jarring, and he immediately recoils from it, stunned. Heart pounding, he instinctively drops onto the mattress, waiting, listening. No shuffling downstairs, no inquiring voices, no footsteps. Even Dark Shadow is silent. There's only the remnants of his shout, hanging in the air around him like a cloud, making no further noise but still somehow echoing back at him. 12:03 a.m. slip quietly out. Stop. Listen. It's clear. Dark Shadow reassures from his position at the top of the stairwell. Begin toward the stairs. Avoid the third step. It creaks more than the others. Pause in the middle. Listen. Wait for the okay. Continue on to the landing. With his companion watching his back, Tokoyami silently goes through the parlor and onto the dining room. You first. No shit. Ignoring Dark Shadow's snarky reply, Tokoyami waits with his back to the wall while his quirk peeks the corner. All good. Tokoyami toes into the kitchen and advances toward the back door. Want me to cover the hinges? Please. Shrinking himself down to a sliver, Dark Shadow wedges himself into the space between the door and its frame and molds his body over the hinges to muffle the sound of their squeaking. Nonetheless, in the dead silence there as loud as screams to Tokoyami's alert ears, he grimaces at the noise, allowing himself only enough space to squeeze his slender body through. Tokoyami slips around the door and gently shuts it behind. Go back under and relock it. Gotcha. Dark Shadow now spreads himself thinner, down to the thickness of a sheet of paper and slips under the door. His claw races up the fiberglass and finds the deadbolt before clicking it into place. A moment later he returns to his wielder, hovering by his waist. I can handle it from here. Tokoyami steps over a row of Michiko's beloved pachysandras and into the grass, intending to avoid the main walkway as he makes his way around to where he kept his bike. You can't be out. If someone sees you, they'll stop me and demand to see my hero license. So just show it to them. They'll have more questions. We can't afford the risk. This sucks. It's all bullshit. He rounds the east corner of the house, sticking close to the wall of it. Please don't argue. The creature tenses, and Tokoyami senses that familiar flare in the pit of his gut. Dark Shadow. Whatever you say, master. Tokoyami freezes, eyes widening in dismay. Immediately, Dark Shadow regrets his comment. He knows the pain of hearing it, can feel how it stings his companion. I'm sorry. For a moment, Tokoyami doesn't move, rooted in place. Then, slowly, he reaches down with his hands open. He grasps Dark Shadow, taking hold of his corporeal form, and draws the creature up to his chest. We are. His voice is somewhat hoarse as he whispers, the same. Privately, telepathically, he adds, we're always in this together. We're equals. I don't mean to hurt you. He inhales a quick, shuddering breath. I know you don't. Dark Shadow leans into him, close enough to begin to phase through his coat and start melding into his flesh. I'm tired. Get some rest. I'll be all right. Tokoyami's skin begins to prickle, and he can feel Dark Shadow seeping in. His mind and body soon become full again, no longer void of their other half. He sighs, relieved. Midoriya's thumb hovers over the call button. He stares hard at the screen, struggling to fight back against his rising panic. Already he'd called 4 times, each going unanswered, and he fears the 5th will be no different. Without knowing his address, there is almost no way of finding Tokoyami, not unless he wanted to spend the night knocking on random doors. After scrubbing frustrated tears from his eyes with the back of his hand, Midoriya taps the green phone icon. Please pick up. It rings only once. Midoriya. Relief washes over him, but it's bittersweet. Look, I'm sorry. I messed up. I know that. But I'm almost at Shizuoka Station. I need your address. There's no need for it. Tokoyami answers quietly. I'm at the station waiting for you. Midoriya is surprised to hear this, but it admittedly did make things much easier for him. Oh, he pauses briefly before continuing. I'll, see you in a bit then. I'll be here, Tokoyami answers. The receiver clicks, and there's silence. He glances at the time. 12:35 a.m., only 10 more minutes. The realization only makes him apprehensive. Tokoyami hadn't sounded angry just now, but he definitely hadn't sounded like he was happy. He just seemed neutral, maybe even resigned. There was no way of telling what Tokoyami was feeling without seeing face, and even then it would still be difficult to parse. In any case, Midoriya was glad to not be getting yelled at anymore. To be fair, I was yelling too. His brain is too muddled to recall who had raised their voice first. Either way, he's plagued by guilt. He'd have to apologize when he arrived. Not just for yelling, but for everything, really. It wasn't until it was too late that he'd understood just how much of an inconvenience his hasty decision was for Tokoyami. He didn't know anything about his friend's situation. Tokoyami hadn't given any details. Yet Midoriya had gone leaping without looking. I really screwed up this time. If he hadn't been so stubborn before, he'd have realized Tokoyami had a right to be angry. It was a testament to Tokoyami's grace that he was willing to come out and meet Midoriya at the station. He's been so nice to me, and I made myself look like an asshole. Above his head, there's a ding, followed by a feminine, automated voice. Arriving at Shizuoka Station, the train begins to slow, and he sees the other riders start to stir in their seats. His nerves spike again, making him feel like there's fire ants crawling along his entrails, twisting things around, using their pincers to tie his intestines into one huge knot. Only a few minutes later the train comes to a complete stop, and the voice comes on the speaker again to announce their arrival. He watches with apprehension as his fellow passengers, mostly bar-goers returning home after an evening on the town, begin to flow toward the doors. They slide open, and people begin to exit in various ways, some walking, some shuffling, some stumbling. Midoriya waits at the back of the gaggle, standing on tiptoe and struggling to peer over everyone's heads. Being only 166 centimeters, he isn't very successful. Finally, the sea parts for him and he's able to get a clear view of the station. It isn't hard to spot Tokoyami. He's almost directly ahead against the far wall, staring straight back. Even from here, Midoriya can tell the other boy had dressed with haste. He's in a long coat with some of the bottom buttons still undone, and his pumpkin print pajama bottoms are stuffed into clunky combat boots. Upon seeing him, Midoriya is immediately compelled to rush over and throw his arms around the boy. He chooses instead to use that momentum to lurch forward and throw himself down at Tokoyami's feet. "Please forgive me," he says as he bows his head and body in an incredibly formal manner. "You were right, I was stupid." His speech quickens and becomes less intelligible as he continues. "I understand if you're mad at me, you have every right to be. I wasn't thinking, and I made you come all the way out here and you're still in your PJs. You must be so cold. Stop that." Tokoyami interjects, kicking at him with his boot as if he were shooing away an unwanted animal. In a low hiss he adds, "You're making a scene." His eyes warily flick over to the other, recently exited passengers who had paused to stare at the spectacle before them. Midoriya cranes his neck to peer up, but doesn't move quick enough for Tokoyami's liking. He reaches down, grabbing Midoriya's arms, and hauls the boy to his feet. Sorry, Tokoyami's sharp glare cuts him off. A set of fingers curl around his wrist and begin to tug him. "It's going to rain. We need to head out immediately." "Hey," Midoriya grunts as he's pulled along. "Don't you want to talk?" "Not here," Tokoyami replies with a bluntness that makes Midoriya wince. The pair exit the landing area and continue around the corner to a bike rack with only one bike loaded into it. Midoriya assumes it belongs to Tokoyami and is proven correct when Tokoyami releases him and begins fumbling with a lock combination. He coils up the bike chain and slips it into his pocket before kicking up the stand and rolling the bike backwards. Once it's out of the corral, Tokoyami will mount and sit with his feet planted on either side. "Get on, you'll have to stand on the rear pegs." Okay," Midoriya replies, a bit skeptical. It had been a long time since he'd been a passenger on a bicycle, and his first time had also been the last. Had it been Akira or Hyaosuke? He couldn't remember. Had hit a bump and they'd both gone flying off. Midoriya had made it home all right, but the sight of him, a bruised and bloodied mess, had sent his mother into a tizzy. Despite his apprehension, however, he complies. After all, this past year he'd had far worse than a few measly scrapes. He puts first one foot on the right peg, then both hands on Tokoyami's shoulders. Using the other boy as leverage, he gets the other foot up onto the second peg and balances himself there. "Don't lean forward," Tokoyami warns him. "I'm not," he protests. He hears his companion huff, but they're taking off before Midoriya can call attention to it. The bike lurches forward, and he feels his legs wobble. Instinctively, he tightens his grip. Tokoyami has to work a fair bit harder than normal to get any momentum, but he does manage it. Soon enough they're in motion and heading out into the street. Having spent the last 2 hours in a heated train car had made Midoriya forget how chilly outside was. Cold air bites his cheeks the minute they leave the station, turning them pink. He glances skyward and finds the stars and moon completely obscured by dark clouds. Oh man, it really is going to rain. Just as he's thinking that, he hears the dull roar of thunder. It sounded close. "Hey, he asks nervously, "how far is it to your house?" 20 minutes. Oh, that answer was not reassuring. "I'm going as fast as I can." Midoriya's eyes widen. I know. It's just." He again warily eyeballs the sky. "I'm aware." Tokoyami's retort stings, even worse than the freezing wind. His lips pull into a tight, firm line, and he doesn't reply. Better if I just shoot up. They roll on in silence. A tension hangs in the air, and it's not just from the looming storm. A minute goes by. Lightning rips through the clouds, briefly illuminating them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The boom of thunder follows it. That's really close. Only a couple kilometers. As he's listening, he picks up the sound of a vehicle approaching. He turns his head and sees headlights in the distance behind them. You have reflectors, right? Tokoyami grunts in answer, not taking his eyes off of them. He watches as those headlights draw nearer and nearer. The car seems to slow. The reach of those headlights inches up the road until he and Tokoyami are flooded in the harsh beams. The vehicle crawls forward and comes abreast of them. Midoriya hears the automatic whir of a window motor and watches it roll down. A man's voice, deep and gruff, bellows out to them. You boys need a ride. Tokoyami doesn't answer, nor does he reduce his speed, even as the car lazily rolls beside them. Midoriya's voice pitches up in panic. And no. Then, hastily, he adds, but thank you. 8. Suit yourself. The engine roars, and the vehicle jumps forward. Seconds later, the pair is left choking on a cloud of exhaust fumes. Bastard, Tokoyami hisses between coughs. You okay? Midoriya inquires. I'll be fine. Are you sure? We can switch. I can pedal for a while. Tokoyami cuts him off. We don't have time to stop, and it's slower if I have to direct you. He wants to argue, wants to insist on taking over for a bit, but it's pointless. Most likely he'd only succeed in making his friend even angrier. Will we even be friends after this? That thought hurts like a stab, feels like a knife in his stomach. Worst of all, he didn't have an answer. For all he knew, Tokoyami could send him home in the morning and refuse to speak to him ever again. Midoriya stews in the pain of that possibility, letting it drive deeper into his gut. Another bolt of lightning rips across the sky. There's very little delay between its appearance and the sound of its thunder. Less than a kilometer now. Tokoyami-kun. We need to get to shelter. Let's find a kombini to stop it. Tokoyami doesn't answer for a long moment, but then reluctantly agrees. All right. From what Midoriya could tell, Tokoyami seemed to be taking him through the less populated part of the city, most likely toward the more rural suburbs. The street they were currently on had almost no traffic besides themselves, and it was lined on either side by small shops, none of which had their lights on. He cranes his neck, on the lookout for the telltale neon glow of a 24-hour store. Where are we right now? Like, what are we passing through? Okonomiyaki. It's a shopping center. Okonomiyaki. Like the pancake. Yes, what a weird name. They pedal on a bit further before Midoriya spots the bright, fluorescent lighting of a shop sign a few blocks ahead. Up there, I see it. It's just as they draw near enough for Midoriya to read the sign. Ministop, that the storm finally hits. And it hits hard. As if Raijin and Fujin were unleashing their full fury. The wind begins to howl like a battle cry as brutal, freezing rain pours down. There's no build-up, no warning. The rain comes in full force, battering the two boys and soaking through their clothes in seconds. Tokoyami brakes hard, almost causing Midoriya to slip sideways. Get off. Tokoyami just run. At his command, Midoriya all but leaps off of the bike. He begins to sprint, but slows enough to check behind himself. Thankfully, Tokoyami is right behind. Your bike. Get it later. Tokoyami shouts back. He catches up and grabs a hold of Midoriya's arm, pulling him to the safety of the store's awning. Shivering and panting, the two boys press themselves against the brick while they recover from their mad dash. Overhead, the rain continues to angrily pound the blue vinyl that shelters them. In between breaths, Midoriya asks, You okay? Tokoyami wheezes back, Yeah. The sound of a jingling bell has them both snapping their eyes to the door. A brunette woman stands in the frame, neck craned to peer at them. They stare back, wide-eyed. Well, she bellows, You two drowned little boys gonna come in, or are you just gonna stand out here looking sorry? The woman steps back into the side, holding the door while giving them space to enter. Midoriya glances to his companion, and then they both scramble to get inside. Once past the threshold, they both, in unison, dip their heads and mumble, Thank you. Yeah, she replies. Under the harsh, white light, she's able to see just how soaked the two teenagers are. Water drips from their hair and clothes, spattering the welcome mat. Upon looking a bit closer, she realizes that she actually recognizes these faces. Oh, the woman exclaims, You're from UA. I remember watching you guys at the sports festival. Let's see, her lips purse as she tries to remember. After a brief pause, she points a finger to Tokoyami. You're that bird kid with the creepy demon thing. And she shifts her finger to Midoriya, the crazy one that broke all his fingers. Is that what I am to people? Geez, embarrassed. Midoriya rubs his neck and mumbles, Ha, yeah, that's us. She smiles back at him, then glances down. He follows her eyes to Tokoyami's pajama pants. Slumber party gone wrong. Midoriya answers, You could say that. Been there. The woman laughs. Your parents are gonna be pissed. FYI. Oh. Yeah, Don't worry, I don't snitch, she promises. For a moment longer she marvels at the pair before clapping her hands together. You poor little boys must be freezing. Let me take you to the back so you can dry off and warm up. I'm 15. I'm 15, Tokoyami repeats, apparently annoyed to have been referred to as a little boy. You're only 15, Midoriya exclaims, turning to face him. Tokoyami replies with incredulence. We're in the same class, Midoriya. Well, yeah, but he fumbles over his words, shocked by this new information. I thought you were older than me. I mean, you're so mature. My birthday is the end of this month. Yours is July 15th. They're not that far apart. Midoriya's eyebrows raise even higher, disappearing into the wet hair that's plastered to his forehead. You remembered my birthday. It's not that hard a thing to remember. The woman speaks up. Not to interrupt, she gestures vaguely. All this, but maybe you can continue somewhere not in the middle of my store. She jerks her thumb to the hallway on their right side. Like the back room. Midoriya dips his head apologetically. Right, sorry, is that really all right? Tokoyami inquires. Your manager may not approve. At that assertion, she has to laugh. Oh, sweetheart, I am the manager. Reaching down, she unclips a set of keys from her belt loop and walks to the end of the hall to unlock the door. Once it's open, she'll hold it and gesture for them to head inside. Midoriya moves forward to go in, and Tokoyami will soon hesitantly trail behind. The interior is fairly simple. There's some boxes of overstock stacked here and there, a table and 2 chairs, a mini-fridge, a microwave, and a monitor displaying live feed from the security cameras. Midoriya also notices a small, portable space heater on the floor. Make yourselves comfy. I'll be back in a couple minutes. Wait, Midoriya trails off uncertainly. I'm Ayaka, the woman supplies. Thank you for being so nice to us, Ayaka-san. She waves him off, but smiles sheepishly. Yeah, whatever. I couldn't help myself. You're too cute. Midoriya feels a blush creep onto his cheeks, and he watches her walk back down the hall and around the corner. Only once she's gone will he turn his attention to the other boy. By now Tokoyami was already seated at the table, hunched over into himself and still shivering. Your coat's soaked, Midoriya says softly. You'll get warmer if you take it off. Tokoyami looks at him doubtfully and doesn't reply. Beginning to peel off his own outermost layer, Midoriya continues, my jacket's wet, but my hoodie's still mostly dry if you want to wear it. He's met with more reluctance, but after a moment Tokoyami does begin to unbutton his coat, seeing that his friend is complying. He hangs his jacket on the back of the second chair and starts pulling off his sweatshirt. As soon as he's free of it, he'll offer it to Tokoyami. Thank you, Tokoyami murmurs, accepting the garment. He spends another moment gazing upon the bright yellow fabric before pulling it on over his black t-shirt. A second later his head pops out of the neck hole. He makes an attempt to smooth down some of his feathers, particularly the shorter ones around his beak, but it's to no avail. There was no hope of grooming them back into place until they've dried. For the time being he was stuck looking like, well, a wet, miserable bird. To Midoriya, however, the sight of his companion is heart-melting. Something about the combination of his pitiful countenance and him bundled in a sweatshirt a size too large for him is especially endearing. He averts his gaze down at the table while he waits for the tightness in his breast to subside. Tokoyami rubs his palms together, presumably to create friction between them. It's this action that has Midoriya redirecting his attention to his own aching hands. Unfortunately, no amount of heat would actually resolve his discomfort. From what he'd read, the pain he felt in his hands had to do with the change in atmospheric pressure, a factor he couldn't change. Still, rubbing them did alleviate some of the stiffness. His friend looks at him sharply, caught somewhere between alarm and disgust, when he begins cracking his fingers. Sorry, Midoriya apologizes. They get locked up if I don't. At that explanation, Tokoyami's expression seems to soften. Do they hurt? He hesitates, then nods once. A little. It's just because of the weather, though. After that Tokoyami goes quiet for a while. Midoriya continues rubbing his fingers, slowly working the stiffness out of them. His motions come to a halt when Tokoyami's fingertips land on his knuckles. He looks up quickly, confused. To his even greater surprise, Tokoyami takes one of his hands, palm up, into both of his own and begins to massage his calloused flesh with 2 thumbs. They start in the concave dip of his palm, moving up toward the base of his fingers, and come back to repeat the motion again, firmly yet gently. Bright pink blooms on Midoriya's cheeks, and he stammers, Tokoyami-kun. Ignoring his exclamation, Tokoyami continues rubbing his palm, eyes not lifting from his work. Does this bother you? Tokoyami asks quietly. Midoriya finds his red irises now looking back at him. The once pleasant blast of the space heater now feels scorching to Midoriya's rapidly heating face. He shakes his head, managing to get out a squeaked, no. While his brain struggles to catch up, he begins to babble, I thought you were mad at me. But you're being so nice to me now. I was. Midoriya clamps his mouth shut. Tokoyami continues on, I was angry, but I'm not anymore. I'm just tired. I'd like to get home soon. Oh, when we get to my house, I need you to listen to me. His tone, while still soft, is now pleading, and do as I tell you. His thumbs, which had paused, begin their ministrations again. I left my home in secret, and I'd like to return to it that way. Despite understanding the severity of the situation, Midoriya still feels his body turning to jello. It was a good thing he was already seated, because if he'd been standing his legs would have surely given out. Tokoyami's rich baritone just had that much of an effect on him. Oh okay, he croaks, feeling dazed. Oh man, he's really, well, right on time to save him from his own jumbled thoughts. Ayaka makes a reappearance. He feels Tokoyami's hands quickly retreat from his own, and he finds himself mourning the loss of his companion's touch. From the way Ayaka's eyebrows raise, Midoriya can tell she'd gotten a glimpse of their shared contact. Thankfully, though, if she had any comment she keeps it to herself. Alright, I managed to dig up a little bit of something, Ayaka announces, holding up a large thermos for the boys to see. Vegetable soup, fresh off the shelf. At the mention of food, Tokoyami perks up with interest. Just a sec, it ain't hot yet. With that statement, she curls both her hands around the circumference of the container. Midoriya and Tokoyami watch in awe as the gray, metal exterior begins to glow. You have a superheating quirk. Midoriya gasps, delighted. Not quite, she answers. It's actually electromagnetism. I can just make metal stuff hot by making a magnetic field with my hands. That's even cooler. Grinning, she sets the now heated thermos onto the table. I've got the magic touch, she declares, extending her pointer finger to boop Midoriya's nose with. Midoriya blinks, then blushes. So cool, he murmurs again. What's with that look? His brows furrow, and he searches Ayaka's face for a clue only to find that she's addressing Tokoyami. He's staring back at her, eyes narrowed into what can only be interpreted as a glare. Ha, Ayaka scoffs, like I'm gonna steal your boyfriend from you. Please, you kiddas are half my age. At the drop of that particular word, Midoriya's back to being a flustered mess. He's not, we're not actually. His reaction only seems to amuse her. Oh, gee, let me guess, you don't like boys. I didn't. Midoriya stutters in confusion. I didn't say that. Ayaka's face splits into a wide grin as her eyebrows lift. She seems surprised, yet oddly pleased. Well, that's good, then. Doesn't hurt to keep your options open. Her large, calloused hand comes down Midoriya's shoulder, and he stiffens under her touch. Did I really just say that in front of Tokoyami-kun? Well, I didn't actually say I like guys, but still. His brain practically fizzles out at the realization. There's a blankness to his expression, and he swears he can hear the ring of static in his ears. I mean, Tokoyami-kun's probably pretty open-minded about that stuff, right? I guess I've never asked. Midoriya nods. Why yeah. Then, more quietly, I guess so. Retreating her hand so she can clap it against her other one, Ayaka announces, well, I got a register to watch. I'll come let you boys know when the rain's lightened up. Blinking away his daze, Midoriya answers with a small bow of his head. Thank you, Ayaka-san. Beside him, Tokoyami mumbles half-heartedly, thanks. She exits, closing the door behind herself, and they're left alone again. Neither boy speaks. Tokoyami pulls the thermos closer to himself. After a long moment, he mumbles ruefully, I can't eat this. Midoriya looks at him, head tilted. A black fingernail taps the lid of the container. No straw. Understanding dawns on Midoriya. He can't drink the broth. Do you want me to get you one? He asks, already getting out of his chair. Before Tokoyami can decline, Midoriya's fingers are curled around the door handle. Sighing, he nods. Thank you. Midoriya exits the break room and begins walking down the hall only to stop short. At the end is a gruff-looking man who seems quite surprised to see him exiting from the door labeled staff only. The man glances Midoriya up and down before turning his head back to Ayaka, who is fixing something on the shelf. Ayaka's eyes land on Midoriya, and she quickly raises a dismissive hand. He works here. We startin' him that young now. I'm 16. Midoriya mumbles, ducking his head low and shuffling past. Thankfully, he seems to accept this. Shrugging, he says, as long as the work's keepin' you out of trouble, and then shuffles into the men's restroom. When he's disappeared, Ayaka will ask, you need something? He swivels his head toward the fountain soda machine, a straw. Ayaka blinks and furrows her brow a bit. What do you need a straw for? My friend. He pauses briefly to gesture at his face, needs it to eat. Oh, right. No lips. Gotcha. She points to a plastic condiment caddy next to the coffee maker. They're right there. He dips his head to her. Thanks. Straw in hand, he slips back into the break room to offer it to his friend. Tokoyami gratefully accepts it and uses it to tentatively sip the hot broth. Is it good? Tokoyami shrugs, then replies, it's warm. He reaches for the thermos and moves Tokoyami's straw to the side so he can push his lips to the rim and drink from it. As he swallows, he understands what Tokoyami meant. The soup was somewhat bland and had a distinctive tin quality. It wasn't fooling anyone. But at least it was warm. Setting the cup down, he reaches into his pocket for his phone. Just as his fingers curl around the device, it buzzes with a notification. Having heard the vibration, Tokoyami glances at Midoriya's phone a bit apprehensively. "Who is that?" "It's just your Araka-san," Midoriya reassures. "She's making sure we're okay." Midoriya's mouth falls open, and he stares at the message in bewilderment. "What's wrong?" "She wants me to take a picture." Tokoyami's eyes narrow. "What for?" He shrugs, clueless. "To prove we're okay." Hastily, Tokoyami digs his own phone out of his pocket. "Space Cadet 13, send me a picture." Midoriya with wet hair. Midoriya and Tokoyami 𝗧𝗏𝗡𝗏 happy. Tokoyami looks up from his phone and sighs deeply, as if pacifying Uraraka had greatly exhausted him. "Well, she is appeased," he answers. "For now. Put your feet exactly as I do," Tokoyami instructs as he begins to slowly ascend the staircase. Midoriya is careful to watch him, noting how he sticks close to the wall rather than near the banister and how certain steps are skipped over. As he follows close behind his friend, a sudden realization strikes him. He's done this before. Did Tokoyami sneak out a lot? How often? Why? These questions itch on his lips, but they seem too personal to ask. Not that now was the best time for it. Anyway, I wonder if I'm the first person he's ever snuck in. That thought has him freezing up on the staircase, and now that it's entered his mind it seems unwilling to be banished. "What the hell are you doing?" Tokoyami hisses from the landing. Sorry, he stammers and hastily thumps up the last few steps. Before he has a chance to get his bearings, Tokoyami grabs his wrist and begins to tug him to the end of the hallway. To his right is a door, which the other boy creaks open and promptly ushers him through. Hazy, purple lights temporarily blur Midoriya's vision, and he has to blink several times to get his eyes adjusted. He stands in the center of the room, gazing around, mystified. To his surprise, the space was tamer than Tokoyami's room back at 𝐈𝐧𝐿. It had the same eerie lighting, but the decor was much plainer than he'd anticipated. From what he could see, there were no skulls, no throne, no swords, just a few posters and a guitar mounted to the wall. He spends a few extra moments scanning the room, and even turning to check the wall behind himself, but finds none of macabre furnishings he'd expected to. What he does discover upon turning back around, however, is his companion, now half undressed, holding his own pants. Midoriya's eyebrows skyrocket into his hairline, and he feels the breath get snatched from his lungs. Why is he getting wet clothes? That's right. He quickly averts his gaze, wary of getting caught staring at his friend's bare legs. His face burns. Why am I being so weird about this? They went to the same school, had the same class, the same locker room. Hell, at the dorms they shared a public shower. Needless to say, he'd seen Tokoyami naked more than a couple times. Yet here he was getting flustered about him being in his boxers. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Do you need clothes? Huh, clothes? Tokoyami repeats as he pads over to his laundry hamper and deposits his wet garments into it. Oh, no, Midoriya answers, I have my own. To punctuate this, he removes his bag from his shoulders and begins to rifle through it. As he's searching around, his fingers brush Usagi-chan. He pauses for just a moment to stroke the bunny's soft cotton ears before continuing. From the depths of his backpack he produces a pair of gray sweats and a simple t-shirt, which would serve as his pajamas for the night. Kind of like a sleepover, he muses. A sleepover? Tokoyami echoes. His eyes widen, and he's a bit startled to realize he'd said that aloud. Kind of. I mean, normally they're, actually planned. Midoriya scratches his chin, looking guilty. I've never been to one. At that, Midoriya openly gapes. You've never been to a sleepover? Tokoyami's sharp gaze reminds him to check his volume. He slaps a hand over his mouth and speaks more quietly through his fingers. Why not? The other boy turns his face away, keeping his eyes on his dresser as he pulls out the bottom drawer. I've never been invited. Oh, after a moment, Midoriya admits, I guess the ones I went to weren't all that fun. Kaken and the others always played pranks on me and made me do a lot of embarrassing stuff. A hint of color rises to his cheeks as he continues. One time I fell asleep first, and they put my hand in warm water to try and make me wet the bed. Did it work? His face flashes hot pink. No, Tokoyami, to Midoriya's relief, doesn't pursue the topic. Instead he murmurs, doesn't seem like you had very good friends. To that Midoriya doesn't have a response. He simply shrugs. It was in the past, and it was pointless to be bothered by it now. None of it mattered. He wasn't the same, wimpy little kid anymore. He begins peeling off his damp clothes, trying to ignore the other boy's presence in the room. It doesn't work. His skin prickles, and he can't shake away his brain's insistence that he's being scrutinized. Stupid. Vaguely, he registers the sound of a mattress squeaking. Do you have everything you need for the night? He looks up to find that Tokoyami has already climbed into his bed. His eyes search the room uncertainly before traveling down to the rug. It would cushion him from the hardwood flooring, but a blanket. Tokoyami grabs a corner of his comforter and holds up it briefly to indicate it. Midoriya's brows furrow in confusion. Then what are you gonna sleep with? That same comforter is again lifted for Midoriya to see. There's a long silence. Too long of a silence. The hamster had taken quite a hard fall, and it was taking its time getting back on the wheel. Oh, is there, Tokoyami speaks hesitantly, a problem with that? It's cold on the floor, so. No, Tokoyami's eyes widen. No, yeah, no, that's fine. Midoriya waves his hands for emphasis. There's no problem. A bead of anxious sweat trickles down his back. The other boy's gaze lingers on him for a moment before he scoots down and lets his feathery head hit his pillows with a soft thumb. Midoriya will then hurriedly finish changing, eager to get into warm, dry clothes. Once dressed, he surveys his wet garments with a frown. Put them in the hamper with mine. I'll wash and dry them tomorrow. Tokoyami answers his unasked question without even looking up. He does as instructed, then stands in place a few seconds, hesitating, before tentatively approaching the bed. Midoriya lifts the comforter and climbs onto the mattress with slow, stiff motions. Under the blanket is blissfully warm, a great relief to his chilled bones, but he's also hyper-aware of his proximity to the other boy. Although the two didn't touch, they were separated only by a few centimeters. The weight beside him shifts, and there's some rustling as Tokoyami readjusts himself. And then there's silence. Well, not quite. There's the drizzle of rain, which had picked up again against the roof, and the steady draw of Tokoyami's breath. He focuses in on it and realizes how much heavier his own is by comparison. God, why am I breathing so hard? Calling attention to it was a mistake. The more he listens to it, the more he tries to force it to become shallow, and the more uneven its rhythm becomes. I shouldn't be here. Coming to Shizuoka had done nothing but inconvenience his friend, and it would continue to be an inconvenience come morning. Instead of making Tokoyami feel better, he'd made him miserable. He called me. He just wanted to talk. Tokoyami had shared his vulnerability, trusted Midoriya enough to admit he was having a rough time, and he'd gone and betrayed that trust by creating an even bigger problem. Tokoyami-kun. His voice slightly trembles. Yes, he swallows, hoping he can make the next words come out steady. Really sorry. I should have just listened to you when you said not to come. You already apologized. I know, but I'm just really, really sorry. You've had to sneak out and come get me. And then it rained and you got cold and wet, and tomorrow you'll have to sneak me back out. Please stop saying you're sorry. His mouth clamps shut, and he swallows hard. He parts his lips again. Before he can speak, Tokoyami cuts him off. I'm not mad at you. There's a pause. Midoriya hears a stutter in Tokoyami's breath when he inhales. I'm sorry I worried you so much you'd come out all this way. Hang on, Midoriya exclaims, taken aback. He sits up in bed, twisting to get Tokoyami's face in his field of vision. Why are you sorry? You're supposed to be mad at me, not yourself. You're not that easy to stay mad at, Tokoyami admits. You should. Tokoyami's voice turns incredulous. Are you really so masochistic that you want me to be angry with you? At that, Midoriya falters. Well, no, but then I don't see the problem. Take your sorry back. Defiantly, Tokoyami narrows his eyes. I won't. His mouth falls open, and he's left gaping with furrowed brows. He closes his mouth. Then he opens it again. Don't be too loud, Tokoyami warns him, flopping back onto the mattress. Midoriya grabs a hold of his own messy hair and groans in frustration. Ugh, releasing his thick curls. He lets his hands fall to either side with a sigh. I didn't want to fight again. For a moment, Tokoyami is quiet. Then, I shouldn't have yelled at you. You didn't yell over the phone, he clarifies. I yelled at you. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I yelled, too. Midoriya half-heartedly protests. To that, Tokoyami doesn't reply. He simply goes quiet once more. Hey, no response. He rolls onto his side, turning until he's face to face with his friend. A couple centimeters separates the tip of his nose from Tokoyami's beak. Are we cool? A tiny nod answers him. Relief washes over Midoriya, bathing his lungs and freeing them of the breath they'd been holding. By just that nod, he's reassured. Tokoyami didn't hate him. When this was all over, and they were both safely back at the dorms, they'd still be friends. Still both stay up way too late. Still find solace in the fact that there was at least one other person suffering from the same relentless insomnia. Still cross paths in the daytime and shoot each other knowing, weary smiles. Maybe, sometime soon we could have a real sleepover, Midoriya suggests. I mean, if you want to. Promise not to wet the bed. Hey, just kidding. A moment later, Tokoyami softly adds. But yes, I'd like that.